I welcome our distinguished guests, Director IIM Rohtak, faculty members, and students. IIM Rohtak aims to nurture thought leaders, not just in the sphere of management, but also from a holistic perspective. We are gathered here today to have a discussion on the topic, Future of Farming in India, reflecting on Farm Bill 2020. In September this year, President of India gave assent to 3 farm bills passed by both the houses of parliament. One of the main provisions under this bill is to facilitate an ecosystem where farmers have the freedom to enter into contracts for selling and purchasing their produce. The bill intends to regulate the farming sector and bring stabilization in fluctuating food prices while encouraging private investments and players to enter and build infrastructure in agribusiness. We believe that open communication and a future perspective from all the stakeholders can help resolve the conversations regarding the Farm Bill. IIM Rohtak took this initiative to host a webinar that will give an opportunity to discuss the future of farming in India while reflecting on the Farm Bill 2020. We feel honored to have with us eminent speakers and experts on the panel with us today. I take this opportunity to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Subramanian Swamy. Dr. Swamy is an Indian politician, economist, and statistician who serves as a nominate member of parliament in Rajya Sabha. Before joining politics, he was a professor of mathematical economics at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. We are truly honored to have your presence with us, sir. The next panelist for the discussion is Shri Suresh Kumar. Sir is Chief Principal Secretary to Chief Minister Punjab. As a member of IAS, Sir has held key positions at various levels of government, from policy, planning, and analysis at federal level to implementation and management of reforms and pro-development programs at grassroots level. We are truly honored to have your presence with us, sir. The next panelist we have with us is Professor Barry Goodwin. Professor Goodwin is an American economist. He is William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor and a graduate alumni distinguished professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics at North Carolina State University. His research and teaching activities are focused on applied economics, policy, trade, and econometrics. We are honored to have you with us, sir. Next, we have with us Mr. Siva Kumar. Sir oversees Agri and IT business of ITC Limited. He also holds responsibility for ITC's Social Investment Program. Alumnus of IRMA, Sir has worked with the Farmers Cooperative for 6 years before joining ITC in 1989. He was the Divisional Chief Executive of the Agribusiness Division from 1996 till 2017. We welcome you, sir. We also have with us Professor Dheeraj Sharma. Sir is Director IIM Rohtak and Professor at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. In experience of over 20 years, he has taught at numerous education institutions in Europe, Asia, and North America. Now, to embark on this journey, I invite Professor Dheeraj Sharma, Director IIM Rohtak, to kindly initiate the discussion. Sir, please.
Thank you. And I'm truly privileged to get an opportunity to facilitate this important discussion. I think these bills which have been passed recently will become law, and then subsequently rules and regulations will get formed, were intended to create an environment which then results in superior outcomes for our farming sector altogether, which includes the farmers, the traders, and the organizations which use farm produce. In recent times, we have seen, while the larger, many parts of the country have presented positive feelings about the bill, there have been certain questions raised vis-a-vis these particular bills in certain areas of our country, owing to their unique positioning and owing to their unique circumstances. Our agenda today is to discuss the future of farming, what will happen to farmers and farming sector going forward in view of these policy changes. May I kindly first request Dr. Subramanian Swamy, who is an eminent individual on economics and authority, a global authority, having taught at Harvard University also for more than 20 years, more so having so much view from within the parliament on such bills, So I would request Dr. Swamy to speak for a few minutes, and then we'll go on with all the other speakers, speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have a discussion, and then maybe take some questions from the students.
Thank you very much. I think the best thing for me to do, being the first speaker, is to place this Farm Act. I think it's already received the assent of the president, so it's become an act. The only thing remaining is the framing of the rules. Now, why was this act necessary? Because right from 1947, when we became free from British imperialism, we have never given any importance to agriculture, and the emphasis has been on industrialization. And the earlier stages, about 40 years, we were stuck with the Russian concept of industrialization, which means big plants and so on, and huge capital expenditure. And agriculture, as a consequence, suffered. It had already been bled dry during the British period, when after the 1857 rebellion, or what we call as the First War of Independence, the British imposed all kinds of revenue extracting methods, including the most exploitative group called the Zamindars. And so by 1947, it was in utter poverty. And Mahatma Gandhi and Sardar Patel had wanted that this agriculture should be given priority, but Nehru was completely swayed by the Soviet concept of socialism and state commanding heights of the state. So now we have to reverse that. It has never been given any prominence except somehow to subsidize the farmers and keep them afloat and so on. What we have to recognize is the enormous potential of our agriculture. Why reform is so important is that the agriculture has got enormous potential. We got about 120 million hectares of arable land, which is even larger than China, which otherwise is 3 times the size of India. We have the lowest yield per acre. Compare this with the experimental plots yield per acre of Agricultural Indian Institute of Indian Agricultural Research Institute. You will get that on the same soil of India, but with the scientific farming that experimentally has been tried by the IARI. We found that they were able to get 6 times the yield per acre which the farmers on average get in the rest of India. We not only in the question of crops, we have 50 million cows, but these are so ill-fed that they give hardly any milk, about 200 liters per year. Whereas the Israeli cow, for example, gives you 11,000 liters per year. So this huge capacity of India, and India has been blessed with weather where you can grow 3 crops a year, but only in 25% of the area we grow more than 1 crop. So how to overcome this? And that means you have to empower the farmers. And there are 2 ways of empowering them. Give them the freedom to be able to times what you get abroad. Basmati rice and an equivalent rice in South Africa and Japan, the difference is 6 times. And milk also is the same thing. In Europe, the milk that that's produced and sold is 6 times what we pay for milk here. So how to do it was the question. And that is why the first proposal, I would say this is probably the first proposal since 1947 of a reform where you liberate the farmer. You say that you don't have to sell to the state if you want your minimum support price. You can find other buyers. They may give you more than the minimum support price. And then you can contract also. Even you can contract on your land, on cultivation. You can do it contractually. The farmer can work on agriculture and contract to produce so much output. So in this background, this act was brought. But there are two drawbacks to it. One is that all over India, there have been different situations. Those which were princely states like Punjab or Tanjavur in Tamil Nadu, they were not exploited. The agriculture was not exploited like it was in UP, Bihar, and so on. So you will find a great deal of support today in UP, Bihar for this reform measure we have brought. But in Punjab, for example, it is a disruptive act, according to most people there. And therefore, we have to now redesign design our rules in such a way that the places like Punjab and Haryana are accommodated to see that they don't have to abide by a rigid observance of this act. So I would say the act is welcome. More needs to be done. Enabling the farmers to export, enabling farmers to use the internet to buy at the highest bidder all over India. All these things are awaiting further reform measures and further bills. But this first step is something that I would welcome, subject to Punjab and Haryana being accommodated through the rules, because there in Punjab, for example, the farmer and the state buyers, there's been a very steady relationship for a long time, and to disrupt that would mean a big disruption, and that is why I think Punjab protests are justified and we should accommodate it. Thank you.
I'll now request Shri Suresh Kumar, Chief Principal Secretary, Government of Punjab. Shri Suresh Kumar is not just the Chief Principal Secretary. He's about 20 years of experience looking after the agriculture and related departments at various levels. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dheeraj. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. I must, to begin with, confess that I am not an expert. I am a plain and simple civil servant, and yes, I've been working in this sector, rural development, agriculture, for a long time. And Dr. Swamy has made my task easier because he's given the complete historical perspective, the way farm laws have been enacted, the purpose, the premise of that. Now, nobody can question the premise. Nobody can question the need of reforms in agriculture. Nobody can raise fingers to say that rule-based trade in agriculture should not be promoted. We all know that subsequent to 1992 and even before that, not only in India, world over, trade as a percentage of agriculture as a percentage of GDP has grown, and unfortunately, trade in agriculture has not grown as fast as we can. Now, to say in one word, the future of farming in India, I'll say it's always good, it's bright. There's no reason to be worried, even if some of us, though I'm speaking from Punjab, so even if some of us are not comfortable in Punjab, but not everything is lost with the enactment of new legislation. If one reads the legislation, I've read it many times, because being in a position where we have to respond to everything and anything which comes to the government, and we have to respond not only to the expectation and aspirations of farmers, as Dr. Swamy said, the original green revolution areas of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, they have to be treated differently. Agriculture historically in these 2.5 states now, earlier Punjab, Haryana was part of Punjab, and Western UP has been like low risk agriculture, fully assured, everything is assured, and the farmers have got used to and has given us the maximum outputs in the past as well as today. Why the future is brought, we've done well, even in small farmings, small units, small holdings, we've done very well. We have secured the national food requirements. We have ensured national food security. We are food self-sufficient. We have proved resilient of our food systems and agriculture. Now, if you see I'll definitely give the COVID experience, because the last 6 months, 8 months, the way we have dealt with the position, and not even one death because of hunger and deprivation. Food was, we tried and dished out the food every nook and corner. I can tell you, despite lockdown, we were able to dispatch over 2,500 train load of food grains to other states. So that was the position. So systems are quite resilient, quite strong. Yes, there have been questions. Now, there have been questions about the legislation, because the premise of legislation which we are told, and which has been many authors, many experts have written. So the legislations are aimed to kind of bring in more transparency in agriculture trade, agriculture marketing. They are aimed at inducing more competition in agriculture marketing. There also been an attempt to say that agriculture markets should be purchase centers should be fully deregulated and APMCs are fully regulated. Freedom of choice, though there is a difference here. Now, not everything is non-transparent in APMC market. Every transaction that takes place in APMC market is properly recorded. Everything is transparently auctioned and done. There are it's only wheat and paddy in Punjab, Haryana, where MSP operations are done very regularly and very effectively. In 3 weeks, we buy about 18 million tons of paddy, and about 3 weeks, we buy about over 13 million tons of wheat. So about 30 million food grains are purchased in about 40 days. Every bit of transaction, every detail is available on record. Every buyer and every seller is identified. But that doesn't mean there are only government buyers. There are private dealers, there are private buyers. ITC, somebody is here from the ITC. ITC is making purchases in the APMC market. ITC has even got permissions under the Punjab APMC Act to set up legislation, to set up private purchase centers. Even Pepsi and others have got permissions to set up private purchase centers. But to totally deregulate has a different meaning. Freedom of choice, yes, farmers should have freedom of choice, but there is a freedom of choice even existing under the existing APMC laws. Whole of quinoa from Punjab, 75% of the quinoa of the country we produce in Punjab. Everything goes to Bengal, Calcutta, even elsewhere. We've been sending quinoa to Russia and other places. Now we've been sending sweet potatoes to Bengal and Telangana and whole of South Indian states. The one logic given to us is the intermediaries. I have never seen in my 37 years in the Indian Administrative Service, is there any trade which happens without the intermediaries? If today the RTOs, the licensees are removed, somebody else will come and sit in the mandis. I can tell you, there are buyers, there are representatives, and the employees of the corporate sector who come and sit in Abor to buy quinoas. They are paid employees. They are not licensed employees, or they are not licensed intermediaries. There are in the financial sector, Dr. Swamy knows it more than me. I am not an expert on the financial market. There are licensed intermediaries, even the agents in almost all financial businesses. So tax-free trading, yes, if it could be done, why not? If the states can afford it, why not? But the states do need money to develop infrastructure. In the rural agriculture marketing infrastructure and rural infrastructure, we have 65,000 in Punjab, taking up only Punjab. 65,000 kilometers of link roads. This number is more than what UP has it. UP is 5 times, 6 times bigger than Punjab. So these premises probably are little far-fetched. And why these are being agitated? One, farmers have some doubts and apprehensions. The process, the way the legislations were enacted, the consultative process, the federal way of involving the state. Most of the states, most of the laws made by Government of India or Parliament in the concurrent list, which impact largely on the rights of the functions of the states, largely concede some space to the states. These laws, if you read it, as I said it in the beginning, they're very well drafted. In fact, to me, some of my colleagues do not agree. These are not typically government drafted legislation. These are commercial legislation, very well drafted. But somewhere down the line, in the government, we should have conceded some space to the states, some space for consultative processes with the farmers, the stakeholders. You just can't overnight wishfully say, okay, there are no intermediaries, there are no farmers, there is no APMC, and suddenly everything will be deregulated. Even 2017, the amendments we made in Punjab, which are the opposition parties, the parties who are not in power right now, are asking the state government to undo. All these amendments we made to introduce e-marketing, e-NAM, and the digital way of doing business, or licensing the private purchases in private markets, private purchase centers. Everything was done in consultation with the Government of India on the lines with NITI and the Ministry of Agriculture. The marketing division had given us the advices. But unfortunately, in a hurry, probably, this is the feeling here, in particularly these 2.5 original Green Revolution states, which have done a lot, though I do concede, as being Agriculture Secretary for over 4 years, 5 years in Government of Punjab, The present way of agriculture, even in Punjab, is not sustainable. We are losing on biodiversity, we are losing on crop diversity, we are losing on the soil quality, natural resources. There's a lot of damage which is coming. Business as usual cannot go on. Reforms are necessary. A good attempt, perhaps if it was little more comprehensive involvement of the stakeholders, consultation processes with the states, probably this would have got us got the government of India and the country much more goodwill than the farmers are now doing it. It's not really that only Punjab, Haryana and Western UP are agitating. Even many other states are agitating. I was privy to some discussion of this all India level farmers association. They are probably meeting the chief minister tomorrow, and they all have some reservations. It is not that those reservations or those problems and issues cannot be resolved, but we have just shut the door of consultation involving the stakeholder. 86% of the farmers have less than 5 acres. They are small and marginal farmers. With that small little operational holding, they have done wonders. They've given you food security. They can even work for nutrition security. They can even be kind of motivated to do precision farming. They can be motivated to do commercial farming. They can also motivated to adopt climate resilient technologies. But somewhere we should have done an exercise to involve the farmers in the process of reform, which has begun. It's a good beginning, I will say, but the farmers' rights, farmers' aspirations should have been taken care, which probably there are apprehensions that have not been done. But it's never too late to talk to the farmers. Farmers can come around. Farmers in Punjab particularly are willing to change, but somebody has to lead them. Somebody has to show them the right path of doing things. We in government have tried it. I have tried it for 5 years, more than 5 years, being the state's Chief Secretary Agriculture. But unfortunately, this came too sudden, too early, and time to discuss with the farmers was not there. And that's the main cause of anxiety. Another side is one major reason for the agitation is there is an apprehension that the minimum support price for food grains will be done away with. Nobody in the government of India is raising this. I have told the farmers, government of Punjab has told the farmers that why are you worried? In the National Food Security Act of 2013, section 22, subsection 4, clearly state that the government of India shall procure food grains. And the food grains have been defined in the rice and wheat. Shall procure food grains, and in the event they are not buying it, they will give equivalent value to the states for distribution under the PDS system. In Punjab, I mean, this is a small and rich state. Everybody thinks Punjabis are prosperous. Out of 300,000, 30 million people we have, roughly 15 million people get rations, free rations, or subsidized ration under the PDS system. As a country as a whole, 800 million people are given, 80 crore people are given free ration or subsidized ration. That is being so, you already committed to buy this ration, you have not said at what price you will buy. While this is a commitment of the food ministry to procure for food grains for the states to be distributed to the poor people at a subsidized price, but the price MSP, the minimum support price, and the price at which the government buys or FCI buys is notified by the Ministry of Agriculture. So there is possibly a window available. If you say that, okay, government shall procure at the specified price, and the price is specified on the recommendation of the Cost and Prices Commission, Agriculture Cost and Prices Commission of the Government of India. So somewhere everything is not lost. Reforms are possible, reforms are welcome, but I think in the process, farmers are major stakeholders, state are major stakeholders. They need to be involved, they need to be consulted, and a way has to be found in a manner that which is acceptable to all. I would suggest that the government of India should engage with the farmers and with the states. Of course, states are more than willing to do it. If we could find a better way of rule-based trade in agriculture, whereby the farmers get more money and the trade progresses, the state, country as a whole, the economy as a whole, the national economy as a whole, we will do much better. I'll stop at that, Dr. If there are any questions, I can answer.
Thank you. I think we'll just take there are about 5-6 minutes for the initial, and then we'll start taking questions. May I now request Professor Barry Goodwin. Professor Goodwin is a eminent scholar, so he can provide us some views on agricultural reforms per se, and how deregulated versus regulated sort of trade in agriculture or procurement is helpful not helpful. So I thought we'll take his views. Over to you, Professor Goodwin.
Okay, thanks very much. Can I share my screen here? I have a few slides. Is that possible? Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. I have to admit up front, I don't know a lot about the Farm Bill in India. I can answer questions about the US Farm Bill, which is the area I work in. But I suggested a topic here that reflects a lot of the work that we're doing right now on a research side. And I'll just walk quickly through it with some slides. And then if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But as you know, we have just had a major election in the US, and climate change is an issue in agriculture wherever you go. But I think you're going to see, from the US perspective, much greater focus on this. This is just a picture of the average land temperature in the world over time from 1850 to modern day. And, you know, it's a very controversial topic in the US and probably in a lot of places in the world. There are some doubters about climate change. I think the evidence is pretty clear that there are some things to worry about. I don't think we know exactly what the implications are, but it has direct implications for the future of agriculture, without a doubt. And the particular thing that we've looked at in this is really how climate change has the potential to affect not just yield outcomes, but the risk of these outcomes, the volatility of yields going forward. And there's two very, very opposing views about this in the scientific community right now that does work in this area. You can look here and see this is a long run picture of technological progress in US maize yields. And there's two things that you naturally see: the adoption of high yielding hybrids that took place in the 30s. And then in the most recent years, we have had biotechnology. And as you probably know, almost 100% of corn and soybeans and cotton grown in the US now is genetically modified. And the big question here that's come up is really whether this new technology, especially genetic modification, has made corn more or less tolerant to stress. Corn is the number one money crop in the US. And it's one of these cases where the scientists are really directly opposed to each other. One side of this points out that corn has become more tolerant to stress as a result of these innovations, and in particular drought and heat stress. And the exact opposite view, which has a lot of traction in the scientific community, is that corn yields have become more risky, in fact, that in either case, the average yield has increased. But the question is, as we have increasing temperatures and more stress on our crops, what's going to happen to the risk of those crops? And there's some very startling pronouncements out there in the scientific literature that say that, you know, even under some very modest climate change scenarios, we may see corn yields decrease by 63 to 82%. So it's a very important thing. And I'm going to talk about maize yields here, but you can make the same argument really of just about any crop. I'll skip over that. We have a really interesting situation that allows us to look at this from a empirical perspective. We had two major droughts in the US, supposedly 1 in 100 or 1 in 500 year droughts, something that would occur only once every 100 years. But we've had two of them in recent history. In 1988, we had a major drought that really decimated the corn crop in the US. And then again in 2012, we had a very similar drought. And the question really is, you know, how did the technology respond to this? How we had a very different bundle of technology in 1988 than what we had in 2012. And the big difference there was the genetic modification. of corn varieties. And again, now in 1988, there was no genetically modified corn. In 2012, you had the vast majority of corn being planted was of a genetically modified perspective. And this is a newspaper article that came out of the heart of the Corn Belt in the US in 2012. And you can go back and read this later if you'd like, but the argument there, talking to a farmer in Iowa during the drought, said essentially that their corn is doing immensely better than would have been expected. 5 years ago, he said the corn would have never held up to this drought. And genetic engineering is really an important part of what caused that. There's a counter view that I've mentioned, and there's some prominent researchers at Stanford University that talk about this. And the view is just the exact opposite of what you hear from farmers, that farmers are really pushing the limit of what's possible with corn. Corn yields are getting more sensitive to heat and drought. That we do have, as a result of that, important concerns about climate change in the future, viability of agriculture, and then all of the implications for the food supply. One of the things that has happened that leads some of the scientists to be concerned about yield risk is the fact that corn is planted much more densely now than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And the argument is that leads to more competition for nutrients and has brought about increased yield risk. One of the things, I won't talk a lot about this, I actually have done some work in India related to the crop insurance program there, but we have a major crop insurance program here in the US. $100 billion in liability are insured each year. And the biggest share of that is in corn. But in the 10, 12 years ago, there was, well, in 2005, there was a drought in Illinois in the Corn Belt, a very small drought. But what farmers noticed was that the biotech corn actually seemed to hold up much better. And it was a very serious drought there, but it wasn't widespread. But it was very similar to what we saw much more nationwide in 88 and 2012. And so farmers were noticing their biotech corn was doing much better. And it led to an endorsement to the federal crop insurance program that if farmers planted certain types of genetically modified corn, they received a discount on their crop insurance. And that discount was supposed to reflect the fact that there was lower risk to that. And this really tells the whole story of what you see, that there's two major pests for corn. Above ground is the European corn borer, which is a pest that eats the ears of the corn. But underground, there is something, the major pest called the rootworm, the corn rootworm. And you can see here what the corn rootworm does to corn. This is the root ball from conventional corn on the left and then biotech corn on the right. And the argument is that in a normal year, you're not going to see a difference. The root system is much smaller for conventional corn, but it's still sufficient to get the nutrients that the corn needs. But during a drought year, this bigger root ball is much more capable of holding up to the risk. And so the argument is that as we see this technological progress developing, we are going to see less yield risk, not more. So it's a interesting argument. This is a picture of the precipitation in 1988, and the red is where we had a shortfall, and then in 2012. And you can look at, you see this, a very similar picture when you look at heat stress, and you look at what happened to how corn yields change from the preceding year. The message here is that it was much, much different in 2012. We had a much smaller effect from the drought, even though the drought was very, very similar. And this picture really shows the same thing. The red dots are the 2011-12 experience. And the farther to the left you go, the more intense was the drought. And you can see that the drought in 2012 was actually worse by this measure than what it was in '88, and yet the corn crop did much, much better in 2012. And so we look at some empirical evidence from this biotech endorsement, and I'll just skip to the conclusions here. We found that indeed the '88 and 2012 droughts were very, very comparable. We looked at crop insurance risks as they were reflected in the payouts, how much the drought caused insurance to pay out, and looked at a lot of different factors that affected this. And using the data from the Biotech Advantage allowed us to sort of do an identical twins comparison between conventional corn, which was not insured under this endorsement, and biotech corn, which was. And we confirmed that there is a very important difference in risk with the advantage going to the genetically modified corn. And an interesting thing that comes from looking at the root system picture that I showed you is that, again, in a normal year, there's not a big difference in the corn. When that difference shows up is when you have a poor crop and when you have poor conditions, and you get a greater yield advantage from the new technology. So I will stop with that. I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I know this is quite different theme from what the overall conference here is about, but it's something that I've enjoyed working on. I wanted to share with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Goodwin. I think it is very useful information because one, you're able to illustrate empirically the usefulness of technology, in augmenting the farm yield, and second, you're able to provide strategic input on which I think again some of these strategic level initiatives need to take into consideration that how climate change itself can result in significant decrease in the crop yield. And thereby, some strategic level steps in the form of government intervention could take place to prevent such a thing from happening in our country as you have witnessed in yours. May I request Mr. Siva Kumar, who is head of Agri and IT business in ITC. ITC is amongst the largest consumer foods companies in our country, as they call it, fast-moving consumer goods. Therefore, it's over to you, Mr. Siva Kumar, if you can share how procurement will change and how things will probably move for the better or worse. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. Good evening, friends. So my remarks I am dividing into three parts. Talking about future of farming, obviously one has to compare with what has been the past. The second part is what does it take really to get to that desirable future, and how do these three farm acts enable that? And thirdly, what else makes up the new ecosystem that the government is putting together beyond these three acts? Together with that, really we are looking at a holistic ecosystem. So what is the past? Indian agriculture has delivered the expectations in terms of making the country self-sufficient from a situation of ship to mouth. Today we are a net exporting nation, but Indian farmers did not get the reward consistent with their contribution. Per capita incomes of farmers is just about a fourth of any of the other sources of livelihood. So therefore, in contrast, the future should be that Indian agriculture can potentially be a football to the world, in addition to servicing the domestic consumers, but more importantly, in a manner that farmers also find agriculture a remunerative occupation with better dignity of labor and quality of life. There's yet another dimension which Professor Goodwin has just pointed out. In India, the past growth has come by consuming a lot of natural resources like water and topsoil. And I think the future growth needs to be far more sensitive to ecology. And of course, we have the bigger challenge of building the climate resilience. I think that is the difference in terms of what are the past and future at a pretty macro level. So in terms of specific institutions created, the two key ones which are in relation to these new acts now. One is the APMC and the second is the MSP. While these are immensely relevant even in future and they must continue, their limitations must be sorted out so that we move towards a better future that we are talking about. APMC is essentially a post-production price discovery mechanism. You produce, you bring the produce in APMC and then you discover the price. And typically farmers lose heavily when they perform well to produce good crop. When you have surplus crop compared to demand, immediately post-harvest, prices tend to fall. And we have serious issues, especially in horticulture projects and products and even in grains as well. So a post-production price discovery mechanism that APMC is one issue that we need to sort out while maintaining the benefits of APMC as a competitive price discovery mechanism. The second, MSP, is a mechanism for pre-planting price assurance, which deals with the challenge that I talked about in APMC. But it has practically operated in just about 2 crops and 3.5 states, which is less than 10% of all farmers actually benefit from this. So that means we need to expand the pre-planting price assurance to all the farmers in order to create this kind of a prosperity, both at a macro agriculture level and to individual farmer level. So these are the two expectations from a new system. The other point is that to raise the farmers' incomes, there are more routes than just a higher price. While price, of course, is the most significant and important route as an incentive. So, and we have headroom in all of them. Let me just point out 5 of those routes. So one is shifting to the crops which are more in demand. You know, over time, of course, shifts have been taking place. As the consumer diet has changed, there is more vegetable, more fruit, and more milk and other elements which are coming up. And so what is more in demand, if we end up producing that, that obviously is one route. Increasing farm productivity is another one. Lower cost of cultivation is another one. Aligning quality with what the market needs, and especially food safety, which is a new cause of concern for consumers, is another element. And of course, increasing cropping intensity where weather conditions and water permit. So just raising prices as one route obviously has implications in terms of what it means to a consumer, what it means from an export competitiveness. Where there is headroom, one needs to move up. But accessing all these different elements is something which will help in bringing higher farmer incomes. So what does it take to get all these 6 different elements perform? So firstly, of course, the farmers need to access demand and price signals at the time of planting itself. So MSP provided one route for a couple of crops in a few states. So how do you get the demand and price signals across all the crops to all farmers is one important need. The second is the real-time weather information at as hyperlocal as possible, along with relevant practices, inputs and equipment for precision farming, because precision farming is what will help in conserving natural resources and responding to the weather conditions that I talked about. And also the ability on part of farmer to hold produce post-harvest and value add to the produce through grading, sorting, and other primary processing for better bargaining power with the rest of the value chain. So all these elements are the expectations to get to this desirable future. And this is where the 3 new acts and 4 other elements that I also talk about of the ecosystem that are being put in place that are relevant. Of course, all the points that have been raised, that more consultation with the farmers, more consultation with the states, making summaries more comprehensive, not to take away from any of that. what is being put in place is dealing with one important limitation that I brought about when talking about APMC. What does APMC do? As a post-production price discovery mechanism, it actually bundles 4 different elements of a transaction together and puts a burden on the farmer under already the pressure of sunk cost of transportation. There is obviously a difference between places like Punjab and Haryana and rest of the country, where mandis are not very far from the villages. But if we get to states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, even in many other parts of Uttar Pradesh and elsewhere in the country, mandis are quite far away, and farmer takes produce there, sinking some cost of transportation, and after that, the price is discovered. Price discovery is only one part of the transaction. Then there is an element of decision to sell, delivery of produce, and receiving of cash. Right. It is not easily understood by most people that there are 4 different components of this transaction which are bundled into one in a APMC situation. Now, this of course doesn't apply to crops like wheat and rice, which are sold at MSP, because price discovery is pretty much known well before. For rest of the 90% of the farmers is what I'm talking about. So it is eminently possible, and which is how the rest of the world operates, that price discovery is independent to selling decision, which is independent to delivery of produce, is independent to receiving cash. It is possible to receive cash ahead of planting. That is when the credit delivery mechanism and the crop cycles are operating fairly independently, and so is the case of delivery, and when the decision to sell takes place, when they are aligned with derivative markets in many of the crops. So what that pressure, what the APMC really puts on the farmer after the farmer sinks the cost of transportation, is something that is now possible for the various models that can get innovated when this is freed up. Of course, APMCs will continue as per the new act, and it is not in place of APMC, but in addition to APMC. And as different businesses innovate and bring these different opportunities to the farmers, it is possible to unbundle them, and together with the farming agreement and the contract farming, which is enabled, it is possible to create those kind of contracts with the pre-planting pricing decisions, and Essential Commodities Act reform would basically ensure that there is enough purchase potential possible post-harvest, and not always under pressure saying that whether I'm exhausting my limit of how much can I buy. And that's how the more investments also will come in. So right. In addition to these 3 acts, given the concern that exists in terms of whether the small farmer has bargaining power with potentially larger corporates or anyone else who can come in with other value chain business models, the other important elements in the ecosystem include, firstly, the new FPO guidelines which have been created more recently. We have been having a history of working with FPOs over the last 7-8 years. Few of them have been successful, many of them have not worked, and all those lessons have been factored into creating these new guidelines so that farmers come together as different forms of collectives to be able to invest in post-harvest infrastructure as well as bargain with rest of the value chain participants, and therefore FPO guidelines must be seen in conjunction with these 3 acts. In addition to those FPO guidelines, one other important announcement that all of you may have heard as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat package is the infrastructure funds for agriculture, horticulture, and animal husbandry and many other forms. And those funds which are then available to the farmers or FPOs is the other element. And the third piece, the role of digital technology is extremely crucial in accessing these to the farmers in all and new corners of the country. And the government is putting in place a foundation layer for a digital ecosystem in the form of what is called Indian digital ecosystem for agriculture, and riding on the data that is accessed, that are available with the government, on which all the digital models that people like us are building can be founded on. And lastly, the deepening of derivative markets. One of the important announcement that has been done earlier part of this year was options devolving on goods, not just on options devolving on the futures.
Understood.
So that is also something that will really create a flexibility for pre-planting pricing decisions. So this is the larger ecosystem that one must look at and see in terms of what a new future that one could create. So that's where I'll stop.
Thank you, Mr. Siva Kumar. I think we can take some questions at this point. I have the first question already with me for Dr. Subramanian Swamy. Dr. Swamy, the process that has been undertaken right now for this particular bill, it is said by many that there was sort of a rush to get these bills passed. Is that necessary given the various prevailing conditions, or this has been an ongoing thing for quite some time?
As far as the idea of bringing reforms in agriculture, that we have been discussing since 2014. The bill was rushed, there's no doubt about it, but every bill was rushed. It was a meeting that was held in the background of the corona. And perhaps they would ideally, what we would have done normally is to send it to a select committee or even to the Standing Committee on Agriculture. But I think the Prime Minister was very keen that this should be in the books. And he felt that suggestions could lead to a future amendment. I mean, the final call is the Prime Minister's. But as far as the rushing through and the states not being on board, particularly since originally when the Constitution was made, it was envisaged that agriculture will be exclusively in the domain of the states. So I think, yes, all those are correct, but sometimes reforms, you see, on these formalities gets unduly delayed, and I think he wanted to do it as a hope for the future, and particularly in agriculture, he wanted some changes, and I don't think, I mean, I would say that in normal circumstances, the COVID pandemic was not there, we might not have done it in this hasty manner.
So the next question is for Professor Goodwin. Professor Goodwin, is there some similar deregulation or market orientation in agriculture procurement and agriculture produce selling that had taken place in the US context, and did that result in positive outcomes for the farmers?
Well, of course, we have a huge farm bill set of policies here that are really oriented toward directing taxpayer resources toward U.S. farmers. And it in a major kind of way, and we've just had, coming out of the election in the U.S., a tremendous payout to farmers from the administration. It was done in sort of a under the table way. It wasn't done through our Congress, but was done directly. But these are intended to be resources tied to COVID relief, the virus, and also a payback to farmers from the because of the harm they have presumably incurred from the trade battle with China between the U.S., and that's particularly soybean farmers. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but there is a huge set of policies that are mainly intended to, in theory, provide a safety net for farmers, to keep markets freely functioning. It's all for the benefit of the farmer, It's a very politically powerful constituency in the U.S., and it has a lot to do with the political economy of the situation. But it's in the case of the big COVID and China tariff payouts that we've just seen, it had an awful lot to do with the election and with the Trump administration trying to maintain support among U.S. farmers, which he was able to do quite a bit. It just, at the end of the day, it was not quite enough. But I'm not sure if I answered your question, so please ask me follow-ups if you need to.
There's another question for Mr. Suresh Kumar. The question is, how important is the role of absentee farmers and the artiyas, the middlemen, who are not providing enough value in the value chain in this entire episode of the negatives of the Farm Bills and Farm Act, the 3 acts?
See, I don't think they are playing, they are very active. You know, this impression has been created. I have no hesitation to say this on record, that somewhere down the line, it is being believed that either the state government is provoking the farmers, or these artiyas or absentee landlords are provoking the farmers. There is absolutely no truth in it. Yes, true. It is true that 1/3 of the total farmers, there are about 18 lakh farmland or ownership holdings in Punjab, and only operational holdings are about 10 lakh, 11 lakh. So 1/3 farmers are absentee landlords, and they do not do cultivation, they do lease out. But that leasing is an unwritten leasing by the farmers. That is what we call in Punjab and Haryana is the market of faith. The 1/3 land, which is about over 1 million hectare land, is cultivated on lease, but that is all oral lease. And that has been working well. There's never been much of a problem in that sense. Now, coming to the artiyas, I don't know who has created this myth that the artiyas do not add value. They carry out certain operations. They may not be producing, but today at night, midnight, farmers need money before they go to the bank, even to the cooperative societies and cooperative banks for availing any kind of cash requirements. In the midnight, they go to the artiyas and get money, and they carry out their business as usual. That is one thing. The cleaning operations, the unloading, loading operation, the storage, the packaging, part of it is assigned to the artiyas as per the terms and conditions of their licenses, which are given under the APMC. So for that value, if they are charging, let's say 12 rupees a quintal or 5 rupees a quintal, depending on crop and depending on areas, that is the value they are giving for services provider. If somebody doesn't clean, somebody doesn't do the water arrangement, somebody does the cleaning arrangement, storage or unloading arrangement, somebody else will come and provide those services. So this is all packaged into one license, which is called a commission agent's license. They get commission for the services they are providing. What will happen in the present unregulated situation where there are no licenses? This cost of cleaning, unloading, loading, all this will be charged to the farmers. The basic thumb rule has been in agriculture purchase center and marketing ever since the Green Revolution, that we do not charge any taxes or we do not charge any fee or cesses to the farmers. Either it is charged to the buyer or the state government pays for it. The farmers have been largely away from any kind of, even if from income tax, they are exempt. No income tax is charged. No other taxes are charged to the producers. Taxes on the buyers, and the buyers need some assistance, for which the commission agent system or intermediary systems or intermediate level, some services are to be provided. Those services are provided for the farmers. So there is who will clean up the crop and then put it into the bags, and then the bags will have to be stitched and they have to be loaded onto trucks to be taken to the warehouses. Who will do all this? Somebody has to do it. And in this process, it is not merely the artiyas. Mind you, there are 500,000 workers who are involved, farm workers, landless workers, both the local workers as well as the workers from elsewhere in the country, which we call as migrant workers, are engaged in this occupation. Their livelihood also depends on this. So it is not that they do not do any service or they do not provide any services. They provide service and they are paid for it. That's the position in the market.
The next question is actually to Professor Swamy and Dr. Swamy and Professor Goodwin both. How was the China-America trade war going to influence the Indian farmer, that's for Dr. Swamy, and the American farmer for Dr. Goodwin?
Well, let's hear the Americans, because the real war is with America. We have a ground war, but not an agricultural war yet. But let's hear him first, if it's all right with you, and it's all right with him.
Sure. Professor Goodwin.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, initially the U.S. prices suffered as a result of this trade conflict, but at the end of the day, there was a program rolled out called the Market Facilitation Payments Program, or MFP, that paid considerably more out to farmers than really what most economists think they actually lost as a result of the trade war. I think the thing to watch now is the fact that we have a new administration coming in, and it's going to be a very, very different perspective on policy. I expect, you know, with the current administration, the whole notion of the good things about international trade really did not have much traction. It was very much a protectionist mentality. There's even legislation that's been introduced to remove the U.S. from the WTO. I think none of that is likely to happen now that we have a new administration coming in that has a much more of a traditional view about the benefits of trade. So I think farmers, oddly enough, benefited from this because of the very, very large payments, which exceeded their losses. That was, again, a political economy, you know, instrument that was used in the middle of an election year to try to secure votes. But it's a good question. It'll be interesting to see. I think we will go back to more normal relations. We're already seeing this trade war and the rhetoric being calmed down quite a bit. And I think you'll see more of that.
Well, let me add to this that the trade between India and China has been characterized as follows. I was Commerce Minister when we first signed the trade agreement. I never thought it will end up like this. China exports finished manufactured industrial products, ranging from cell phones to machines and refrigerators and so on. And they import from India raw material, pharmaceutical preparations, Kudremukh iron ore, which is probably the best in the world, and so on. And we have a $50 billion trade deficit with China. So agriculture doesn't really figure as the problem item in this. We, of course, now, since we have an undeclared war, so many restrictions have come in, and the Chinese exports to India have been dwindled quite a lot. And in the future, what course will take, I can't say, but agriculture is not the problem as far as trade is concerned.
Mr. Siva Kumar, can you just scroll up a little bit? The questions are coming from students, so I'm just going to read the question for Mr. Siva Kumar. How do you see a rise in storage and post-harvest infrastructure at farm gate level? Is it possible that we're likely to shift to the dairy model, where the grains will be sorted, graded, and collected by private players?
Yeah, I think more of infrastructure will come closer to the farmers, by the farmers or by the FPOs, partly supported by the new infrastructure funds that are created. It certainly always is much less costly to sort and grade closer to the farms, because once these things get mixed up, to subsequently segregate them is always more expensive. So therefore, even in dairy, that's what is happening. Now, in the earlier technology where milk was collected in cans and then brought to a central milk chilling center, the milk from different species of animals were mixed up. It was difficult to trace them back to the individual types of animals. But with now more rapid milk chillers being available with self-sufficient energy, we are seeing that the chilling is taking place in the village itself. So wherever there are no legacy investments in dairy, all the new investments are happening where milk is chilled right in the village. So very similarly, it is going to happen in other agricultural produce also, both in fruits and vegetables as well as in the grain crops. Certainly, it will get accelerated by virtue of these new infrastructure funds, and that is more efficient also.
The question is, would the corporate sector invest in such endeavors, or they would continue to rely on government to take these initiatives?
Certainly, because once the farmer level investments are done by the farmers together with the support of government, there is more viability for rest of the value chain investment, whether in processing or in the logistics or at an aggregation level. So those investments will fall in place from the businesses also.
So there's another question. The question is for Mr. Suresh Kumar and Dr. Swamy. The question is that MSP was provided in the APMC market. The farmers always had sort of the option to sell their crop any way they wanted. Was that so? If not, could you please clarify?
Who goes first?
If you allow me, sir, I can do it because I have handled the APMC markets for good over 10 years. We've been standing in the markets and doing all these operations. Farmers have full choice. The government procurement or government auctions come in, government takers or agencies come in only as and when the farmers do not get the MSP. There are still buyers in the APMC markets in Punjab and Haryana and Western UP where private players do buy. Private, like Mahindra's, ITCs, Reliance, they go and buy good quality wheat and good quality rice. The whole of Basmati, over 32 lakh tons of Basmati every year goes into the export market, and all the buyers are private buyers. Even in the APMC market, there is no restriction on farmers to sell the produce the way they like it. But in any point of time, anywhere in the state or outside, they feel that they are not getting the good remunerative prices. Government comes in for all those 23 crops for which the MSP is declared by Government of India. Government agencies come in and they try and ensure that the prices do not go below the MSP. For wheat and rice, I see also a question from one of the students that wheat and rice, if the production goes beyond the procurement, what does the government do? Let me tell you, on the one side, people feel that there is excess production. This year, there's a bumper crop of paddy. Right now, the procurement, which is about to finish, we have crossed 200 million tons. We were given the targets 180 million tons. Now, these production targets are not decided by the state governments, both for food grain crops, the wheat and rice. The production planning is done, both summer and winter crops, which is Rabi and Kharif crops. We have attended at least 30 meetings in the Ministry of Agriculture, right up to the minister level. Mr. Sharad Pawar, the last I attended the meeting was with Mr. Sharad Pawar, the Agriculture Minister. The final targets are decided at the level of minister, where all the state secretaries and state ministers attend the target. Production targets are given for food grains for the central pool after assessing the requirements, after assessing the availability of food grains in the central pool. The targets are given by Government of India, and even the procurement figures, procurement quantities are also decided by Government of India. The finances are provided by Government of India. In every grain we pick up in mandis of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, it is on behalf of the Government of India. The stocks do not belong to us. It is their money. We hold the stocks. For holding the stocks, incidental charges, the service charges are given to the agencies and even to the RTS. That's the system which is fairly well written and well documented as per the law. Sir.
So the problem is not in the question of system in place. A farmer comes with his crop to the market. He can't go back if the price is not right. Therefore, there's tremendous scope for price rigging to force the farmer to sell at a lower price than he would like to sell. And that is the real issue where we are addressed that the farmer should not be constrained to sell in only one market. But of course, you can't make it workable unless you have an infrastructure, roads, transportation, so many things to back the farmer. And perhaps also a conscious building of, particularly for certain types of products of farm cold storages and so on, which don't exist. And in the long run, I think we should also empower the farmer to export when it's so much cheaper abroad. I mean, our prices are so much cheaper than all other prices that are charged by other countries. So I think this is a much bigger problem than just saying that farmers come, they can sell to the government, they can get MSPs and so on. Farmer must make a profit so that he can expand. He can have a good standard of living, as it was pointed out by the Chief Secretary in his initial statement. The plight of the farming community has been pathetic compared to the kind of progress we have made in other sectors.
There's a question, and I'm just combining 2-3 questions now. There's a lot of this used to be a statement that when you export rice, you also export water. Now, this problem is particularly germane to Punjab, Haryana, where the water table has really gone down. I'll take that view from Professor Goodwin later, but the question is actually for Suresh Kumar and Dr. Swamy. Is that over a period of time, this issue is largely on wheat and rice, and heavy dependence on wheat and rice. The question that the student has asked is that why not native crops? Why so much dependence? And what could be some of the ways in which could facilitate the implementation of at least the spirit of this act is reduce the number of hectares which are under the paddy plantation, particularly.
Yes, Mr. Suresh is going first.
So I can take that. Yes, it is true. I mean, if I say so, I mean, it will not be exactly correct, but we are told, and we are experts and water experts in the Department of Water Resources. I've been Water Resources Secretary of Punjab also for over 5 years. But experts in the Punjab Agriculture University, we are exporting 1 Satluj river every crop. That's the level. It is very, very water intensive crop. We kind of consume about over 5,000 liters per quintal, whereas it is about 2,500 to 3,000 liters in Bengal and Telangana and other coastal areas where rice is the staple diet and rice is consumed. We are not consuming 85% of rice, whether it is long grain aroma rice, basmati produced in Punjab, or the common rice, common paddy which is produced in Punjab, that is said. But then why did Punjab get into rice production? This was not Punjabi's choice. We were primarily wheat and maize cropping pattern. After 1966, when the Green Revolution was ushered in and Government of India gave us the targets and gave us the plans and policies and all the support in terms of every assurance, credit, water, marketing, everything, imports, whether it's fertilizer, agrochemicals, everything was assured at a subsidized price by Government of India because we needed it for the national pool, we needed it for the national food security. Now, gradually the area under common paddy has come down. The basmati takes lesser water. Common paddy takes more water than maize and basmati. We are gradually, as it has come down, it used to be over 2.8 million hectares. It's now, this year, it has been 1.92 hectares. Rest of the area has either gone to the maize cultivation or basmati cultivation. Basmati takes roughly 40% of the water which common paddy takes, and maize takes 40%, and basmati takes about 60% of the water which common paddy takes. In such a situation, the option before the country, before the nation is not to withdraw from Punjab. Punjab should definitely change and diversify to other crops which are more remunerative, less water guzzling. That is the choice, but it has to be a gradual process. From 2.8 million hectares, we brought it down to less than 2 million hectares. Now it can further come down. We can increase, and the total trade of basmati, purchasing basmati sales is in the private sector. It gives more money per hectare than the common paddy, and everything is being exported. 15 to 20% is sold in the domestic market in Delhi and elsewhere. But if you go to anywhere in the UK market, in the market in Gulf, even in America, where most of our Asians, most of rice consuming people are living, you will find basmati from Punjab. And we have the geographical indication tag, Lahore to Dehradun. Lahore to Dehradun is the GI area for Basmati, and this is a less water guzzling crop. We should gradually move to Basmati, then Basmati to maize. Now the problem is in the crop diversification program which Government of India gave, Mr. Sharad Pawar was Agriculture Minister. It was in 2014, it was overturned. I had a meeting 2014. I was the Agriculture Secretary, State Agriculture Secretary, and I used to have meetings. In one of the meetings, I don't want to name it, Mr. Dr. Swamy knows it. He the minister was from Bihar, and he tells me, "Agar Punjab mein makka lagaoge, to Bihar ke makka ka kya hoga?" But never realizing that originally Punjab was a maize-producing state. We used to produce more maize. It is just that after Green Revolution, when wheat and paddy was national targets were given to the Punjab, why were these given? Punjabis being dynamic farmers, good quality soil, adequate water available, and there was a willingness, there was a readiness to change. And with some support and some policy and program support and some other incentives to the farmers worked hard to achieve the national food security. Now, having achieved a level of prosperity, a productivity. Now, Dr. Swamy was saying that the two crops and 3 crops. On an average, Punjab farmer is taking 2.5 crops. And our productivity is as high as once Prime Minister, I attended Vibrant Agriculture in Gujarat, and our present Prime Minister was the Chief Minister. And our Chief Minister, I was accompanying him as Agriculture Secretary. Our productivity is as high as Brazil. 11 tons per acre per annum. And if you take wheat, paddy, and the Zaid crop, the third crop, our Punjabi farmers take, whether it is any of those pulses or whether it is any of the fruits and vegetables we do it, whether to chickpeas or whether to potatoes, whatever we do, our total productivity in Punjab, we are saturated. In terms of quality of soil, we are depleting. Water consumption is very high. Now, these are the problems. At the same time, biodiversity, crop diversity losses, and the threat to nutrition security. Let me tell you, we produce 1 liter, Shiva Kumar mentioned about dairy products. We produce 1 liter milk per day per person. There are 30 million people in Punjab, there are 30 million liter milk is produced every day. So we have enough wheat rice, we have enough milk. Beyond that, Punjabis have nothing. We are net importing on fruits, we are net importing on vegetables, we are net importing on pulses, we are importing everything else into the state. We are net consuming state, but the crop diversity has gone. The biodiversity is depleting. So as I said, reforms have to be there. Punjabi farmers are ready. But process has to be gradually evolved in consultation, in participation of farmers. They are the major stakeholders. They have achieved a level of living. They have achieved a level of prosperity. They can't go back. Poverty cannot be allowed to revisit the farmers. We have to see, we change over to system which gives them enough. At least if they're getting 100 rupees a day today, they must get 110 to change. They can't be asked to change at 80 rupees or 90 rupees a day. That's the situation we are confronted. And the system, whether the Government of India does it or state government does it, maybe jointly both of them do it. We have to evolve the system whereby the present level of livelihood, present level of prosperity is sustained and something more is given to the Punjabi farmers, particularly Punjabi farm laborers, particularly. I'm sure reforms and change will come in.
Understood. Sir.
Hello. Well, first of all, when people talk about water shortage, strictly speaking, I shouldn't be saying this, but I find it laughable. We have the longest coastline, and you can desalinate seawater. Israel, Saudi Arabia, these countries don't have a river worth the name. And they have flourishing, I mean, at least Israel has a flourishing agriculture, all based on desalinated seawater. That same technology has gone to Dubai and UAE and to Abu Dhabi, and you find green gardens and so on in these sand places, all by desalination seawater. And you've got this huge Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, and Arabian Sea. There can never be a shortage in India. Moreover, our rivers, some are running out of water, but there are large number of rivers which go 90% or more into the ocean. Kerala, for example, has 46 rivers which have 98% going to the ocean. Godavari goes 90% to the ocean. So link these rivers if you can. There is a solution for that water, and India at least cannot say that we are running out of water, because we are running out of ideas, but we are not running out of water. Number two, I personally think that the question of shifting or changing crops to conserve water is not called for. It's not necessary, because these are items which are in demand all over the world. What we should be doing is fighting with the Americans. Why you are blocking our wheat? Why you are blocking our rice? Why you are blocking our potatoes? Of course, they have what is called as a problem, which is called which the professor mentioned, where you have to have a safety net. But you would be surprised to find that that same logic is not used when they want Walmart to come to India. So somewhere we must do some hard-nosed bargaining to open up our farmers' markets to countries like United States. You'd be surprised to know mango was imported from in Europe from North Africa and not from India. And those mangoes are, in my opinion, not worth eating. So the opportunities are many, but in terms of thinking there is a question of short-term thinking and long-term planning. And I think in agriculture, it's about time. Let me say one last thing about Punjab and Mysore. Both these were kingdoms. They made a peace treaty with the British. The British did not do the exploitation that they did with UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and all other places which were not, did not have a pact with their Rajas. The British directly ruled them. These states, the British India government is in total command, and they extracted as much resources they could through zamindars and all the criminals that they put in place, and without any law. And so, therefore, in my opinion, we should be talking more about UP and Bihar and Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, and less about Punjab.
Just the last two questions. One question for Mr. There's one question for Professor Goodwin, and the other, and also a linked question with Mr. Siva Kumar. Mr. Siva Kumar, the question is, there was an initiative by ITC e-Chopals. It, to the best of the knowledge of the person who's written the question, did not have that sort of superior outcomes. And so do you think now there is an opportunity for e-Chopals to expand? And second, in line with this, the question for Professor Goodwin is that the farmer markets in the US, the government procurement, is there any government procurement at all? Does government, and how does government ensure national food security in the absence of very limited government procurement in the United States?
Yes, in the past, we could only roll out the e-Chopals wherever the state governments had reformed the APMC or given us special permission to set up. So right now, with countrywide freedom to set up the various alternative procurement models, certainly it is possible to expand. The concurrent law of Essential Commodities Act was another hurdle. We make investment and suddenly Essential Commodities Act is invoked and the whole investment becomes unviable. So now there is a predictability in terms of when the order can be invoked, and consequently that also helps in viability. So we are certainly seeing potentially faster traction with the new regime in place.
Professor Goodwin?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note, you may be familiar with this, but our farm bill, 80% of the funding, and that's $1 trillion over a 10-year period, 80% of that goes toward nutritional assistance. And food availability, food security is a very big issue in the US. And with COVID and the things that have taken place, it remains a major issue. We have nutritional assistance that's given out through subsidized food, and about 1 in 8 or 1 in 9 individuals in the U.S. Receive those benefits. So hunger and food security is an issue, which may come as a surprise in some cases, but it's a major issue in the U.S. We do have a great divide between rich and poor and the food secure households, and especially households with children and so forth. And there are programs out there to help with that. A major reason why that's bundled together with the Farm Bill in the U.S. and foreign policy is that agriculture, the farm sector, is a decreasing share of the overall economy. That's true just about anywhere in the world you go. Over time, as countries get richer, agriculture is sort of a smaller share of the overall economy. And to get a farm bill passed that has all of these many benefits for farmers, there has to be something out there for the non-farm part of the economy. And there has been talk of splitting those two pieces of legislation apart, which will greatly diminish the support for providing these large subsidies. And one thing to keep in mind about the U.S. farmer, the U.S. agriculture sector, by and large, farmers in the U.S. are much wealthier than non-farm households. They have higher incomes than non-farm households. A lot of their income comes from outside of the farm. So food security is a very important farm bill issue, but it has a lot to do with the non-farm sector as well.
Wonderful. I think that's sort of the total time that we have for today. I'd like to convey my heartiest thanks to Dr. Subramanian Swamy, who's been so generous, particularly with my institution. He's always spared time to guide us. Sri Suresh Kumar, he was incredibly busy, but the moment we requested him to talk on the Farm Bill and the future of farming, he readily agreed. We're grateful to you. Professor Goodwin, I know it's early in the morning for you, and we'd love to have a longer and deeper engagement with you at another time. Thank you so much. And Mr. Siva Kumar, so kind of you for sparing time today to come talk to our students. We were on YouTube Live, as you all of you know. I'm grateful to you, but I think the overall essence here is, if we learn from the American experience, eventually food security will become very, very important. And COVID has made nations realize the importance of food security. So maybe a rapid or quick transition is probably not in the best interest, as Professor Goodwin pointed out. I think we have taken a very, very important step, which in the long term is going to result very, very good outcomes for our farmers and the farming sector per se. But I believe it has to be a gradual process, and I think that gradual process is what is going to happen. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best. Thank you. You have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, respected panels, for an insightful discussion and for taking out time. We will now move to the next panel. Now we have with us the next panelist. Our first panelist for the discussion is Professor Ramesh. Sir is a renowned Indian agricultural economist and policymaker of repute. Over the last 3.5 decades, he has been actively involved in food and nutrition security related agricultural issues. We are delighted to have you with us, sir. Next, we have with us Professor Ashok Gulati. Professor Gulati is an Indian agricultural economist and a former chairman of CACP. Recipient of Padma Shri, sir is currently Infosys Chair Professor for Agriculture at Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. We are honored to have you with us, sir. The next panelist for the discussion is Dr. Samar Singh. Sir is Vice-Chancellor, Chaudhry Charan Singh, Haryana Agricultural University and Maharana Pratap, Horticultural University. Sir has over 30 years of experience in the field of agriculture research and has handled several research projects. We welcome you, sir. The fourth panelist for the discussion is Dr. R.S. Sodhi. Sir is Managing Director of Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, AMUL. Alumnus of IRMA, Sir has headed the marketing and sales function of AMUL for more than 2 decades and has spearheaded their highly innovative and widely acclaimed marketing campaigns. He has been instrumental in launching more than 50 new products during his tenure as Managing Director. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. To start on this discussion of the panel 2, I invite Professor Dheeraj Sharma to kindly initiate the discussion. Sir.
Good evening and namaste. I'm particularly grateful to all the 4 people who have joined the panel on this important topic of future of farming in India and reflecting on the farm bills, 3 farm bills which have been passed recently. They've become an act of the parliament now. The rules and the regulations will be made, and this will pave a way for transitioning our agricultural sector and will probably result in significantly different outcomes for our farmers than they are now. I would request the panelists to each one of them to speak for about maybe about 10 minutes initially, and then I would there'd be questions. The students are writing their questions. There are a number of questions, and then we'll go to the Q&A part of it, and we'll try to give information on how this particular step will result in the future, will result in some significantly improved outcomes for the future of farming in India. So may I first request Professor Ramesh, member NITI Ayog, sir, if you would be kind enough to, it's over to you.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. I find the speaker in the previous session have already set very nice ground and tone for the second panel. I was able to sit in the previous session for about 20 to 25 minutes. And I got some feel of what different panelists might have spoken. So I would try to avoid any repetition of what I expect has already been covered. I will just pick up some points rather than following a particular kind of sequence, because I find from the question answer session of previous session that that the sequence may be a bit boring for the listener. So let me pick up important point and share my views with you on those. I think first of all, it is very, very important to know why government has to bring these reforms in agriculture. Is it that just suddenly government thought that let us do something great to earn some great goodwill, like Bajpayee ji that we did in a clear blast? Was it something like that? Or there was a situation evolving, developing for a very long time, and this step was in a way culmination of that process which was already happening. As you all know that India started publishing statistics on suicide in different professions in 1995. Since then, beginning with the work of Saidas, you see how many papers have been written on agrarian distress, farmer suicide, farmer unhappy with their profession, and all that. It is obvious that when farmers are unhappy with the existing system, we must try to change the system. So this is how I take that there was a strong need. Those of you who are interested in detail, you can go to NITI site. I have put my paper on New Farm Act, understanding the implication in English and Hindi. It gives the detailed background. So this is, I would say that when situation is so bad, there is always a need that you do not then stick to business as usual. You think of working some alternative set of doing the things are the options. In my paper, I have written really 12 reasons for bringing these reforms. And another reason was, we all know that reform was started in 1991, but agriculture was left out. The reform agenda was left incomplete. And I have mentioned in some of my writing that it was Dr. Hanmantha Rao and Dr. Ashok Gulati who were first in India to raise voice to bring reform in agriculture. So around 2000, some agenda for reform already started buildings, and gradually it has moved in a particular in a particular direction. Then again, whether these reforms were sudden, whether stakeholders have been consulted or they have not been consulted. In fact, some information will be given by Professor Gulati. Also, the consultation process started as early as year 2002. Since then, a series of consultations were held with the states, with Agriculture Minister of the state. A committee of state agriculture minister and state marketing minister themselves gave the report that the topmost agenda of the reform should be that we should reform APMC Act. So then you just find that after that again, what kind of reform, which government brought. So that is there. I just found, I wish Suresh Kumarji was here and we could have some debate, that these reforms have ignored farmers. Now you see, two main national political parties, they are bringing a reform agenda in their manifesto. If it was against farmer, do you think any political party will do the blunder of including that thing in their manifesto that we are going to bring these reforms? So just to say that consultation was not there. There were meetings in NITI Ayog. Before that, there were meetings in Planning Commission. Lot of meetings in Krishi Bhavan also. And I remember last meeting on Model APMC Act and Contract Farming Act, where Minister of all the state participated. It was there in the Vigyan Bhavan. I was also there. No state objected to the reform agenda in APMC Act, etc. Now, talk of agriculture being a state subject, that why center had to do this. Why center had to do it is that for 18 years, all central government tried hard to persuade state to bring the reforms, but state were not coming on board. When you call them, you hold a meeting, they will all say, yes, 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 we want these reforms. But when they go back, they were worried about the votes of the middlemen. They were worried that we will not change the status quo. Then you just found that whatever reform they have done, very patchy, very diluted, incomplete kind of reforms were done. So this government showed guts, they showed the courage, and they brought these reforms. I'm not mentioning those 12 reasons which necessitated that we should have these reforms. Now coming to these three reforms, these three acts, the first act related to Trade Facilitation and Promotion Act. It has a bit longer name, but in summary, I call it Trade Facilitation and Promotion Act. This act, what it does is simply expand what was done by UPA government in 2013, that they persuaded 13 states which were ruled by Congress and their allies to take fruit and vegetable, denotify those. Take fruit and vegetable out of APMC Act. Now this government has simply expanded the list from fruit and vegetable to cereal, oilseed and pulses, nothing else. Rest is that we are extending it, we are just stretching it. The simple addition which is made in this act is, the simple change made in this act is that whatever was done in year 2013 by Congress governments, that nearly 16 states took fruit and vegetable out of APMC Act, they denotify. The meaning of this Trade Facilitation Promotion Act is that now all crops are denotified like fruit and vegetable, and that is done pan India. That is not only specific to one state. Regarding benefit, I find Professor Sharma has already indicated. I don't want to go into it, that why we need these reforms. In fact, today, not only that we are having surplus of rice and wheat and we are not able to sell it in outside market, we have 6 million ton of sugarcane. We don't know what to do with it. Next year, it is going to increase to 14 million ton. Imagine if we are having that kind of buffer stock and we are not able to sell it in international market, what do we do with it? Then why we are not able to sell it in international market? Because we do not have export competitiveness. The logistic cost is so high He constituted a committee, high-level committee, which was headed by the ITC chairman. They calculated that in India, logistic costs are 15%. You imagine. But commission agent is not 5 rupee, which Mr. Suresh Kumar was saying. I wish he was there. I would have asked him. It is 50 rupee. He was mentioning only 1/10 of it, because charge of commission agents in Punjab are 2.5% of price paid by the seller. And if a seller is paying 2000 rupee per quintal, the commission agent get 50 rupees. So it was not 5 rupees, which he was quoting to justify presence of earthiyas in the system. So that is another reason. I do not want to go into a lot of benefit. I will briefly come to the issue which is raised by the farmer, what will happen to APMC. And comparison is made that in Bihar, APMC Act is not there. You see the situations. A total misinterpretation of this Trade Facilitation Act. This act nowhere mention or has any kind of intention to see to it that APMC markets are not there. In fact, when discussion took place, so many people participated, Mr. Suraj Hussain and others, this issue was discussed that what will happen to APMC. Then I wrote a small paper in Indian Express, and again in my paper I have explained in detail. The threat to APMC market is not from new Farm Act. The threat to APMC market is from the revenue that state is charging in these markets. These markets now were not meant to create source of revenue for the states, which they have made them. These markets were created to provide infrastructure service to the farmer. But now they are less a infrastructure service to the farmer and more a source of revenue for the states. And can there be a bigger contradiction than this? That there is 6% rural development charge and market fee on wheat and paddy in the state of Punjab, which is purchased by FCI, but only 0.5% on basmati, which is purchased by private people. So there's a clear case that states started using APMC mandi as a source of revenue, as rent seeking. In Madhya Pradesh and 12 other states, there are no commission agent in the system. They are working smoothly. I just discussed with those, they told me that only 0.5% value of produce is sufficient to run APMC mandi. Rest of the money is used for different purpose. So just to say that if these mandis are not there, we will not be able to have rural development, then that logic apply to everything. That we will charge full money students who are going to government schools because children need roads to come to their school and we have to build those roads. So you see, to say that we have to construct roads, you give this money and you are not including this money in the consolidated fund of India. So in brief, what I want to say is that there is no threat from this act to APMC mandi. If states bring down the charges to reasonable level, which according to me is 1.5%, including charges of the commission agents, then you will find that APMC mandi will not only exist, they will flourish. Right now, more than half of produce is sold outside APMC because infrastructure is incomplete. So those who are operating in mandi, they are getting some advantage also, that you get entire produce at one place. You don't have to sell your staff to receive the produce. So if charges are brought to reasonable level, as is the case with the state of Madhya Pradesh and some other states, then you will find that there is no threat to APMC mandi, and real gain of these reforms will be realized when APMC mandi and private channel will compete with each other and they will coexist simultaneously. The second argument is made about what will be impact on MSP. Bihar example is often given. Today also I read my article by one PAU professor. Bihar situation, what happened after they scrapped APMC in 2006, and now he did not compare what was the situation in Bihar before 2006. 10 years before 2006, exactly 10 years, Bihar farmer got 30% less price than MSP for paddy. Paddy is their main crop. After 2006, they still got less price than MSP, but it is 20% less. It is not 30% less. So just to say that Bihar ka case and all those kind of things, I think that doesn't make the sense. I can also say that in Bihar, without APMC, we are able to procure 16 lakh ton of paddy. Will I draw this conclusion from then that you don't require APMC to procure it? In Kerala, we are able to procure 7 lakh rice. There is no APMC in case of Kerala. So what I am trying to say is that existence of APMC neither guarantee MSP nor its absence deny that MSP will not be there. So many examples, there are strong APMC in Punjab and Haryana, but nobody gives MSP for maize in Punjab. So there are states where there is no APMC, but still produce is procured at MSP. Coming to the second act, this Farm Service and Price Assurance Act, I again feel that this act is being equated with corporate farming, which has nothing to do with this. No state in India has corporate farming, nor there is any element of corporate farming in the Contract Farming Act. This act says farmer will do the farming. Producer will just buy produce from him or give him some input or credit or other kind of technical service if farmer wish to have that. And it is not compulsory that every farmer has to go for it. It is optional. We have hundreds of examples of contract farming in this country. I have not heard any case where contract farming firm has usurped land of the farmer or has taken over asset of the farmer. So I think this just to say that there is no benefit from contract farming doesn't mean that there is loss from the contract farming. Even if I take state of Punjab, they were the pioneer. Pepsi was first to come there, but it was a failure. But that failure did not cause any harm to the farmer. They were doing their farming as they were doing before contract farming of this Pepsi. And the second example we are ignoring in Punjab, that 1961 onwards, Nestle is operating in Punjab. There is a FAO study, you just see that how much benefit farmers are deriving from this partnership with Nestle in Moga districts, where lakhs of farmers are selling their produce and getting benefits. Regarding the third act, I think I'm exceeding my time. Just I will take 1 minute. Essential Commodity Act. In fact, this Essential Commodity Act is not against farmers. Essential Commodity Act modification is not against farmer. Essential Commodity Act is meant to put a check on prices going above some levels, which is in the interest of the farmers. And there is a modification in this act. The act has not been removed. Government is retaining the power. As we might have noticed that on 23rd of October, Government of India has revoked power under this modified Essential Commodity Act, and stock limit, etc., have been put on onion. So it is not that power has been taken back. So I find that these acts are either misunderstood or they are misinterpreted. If you go into the intent of these acts, you go into the spirit of these acts, you just find that they are a win-win situation. In no way they are going to cause any adverse effect on anyone, even on Arthias, that if they charge reasonable amount, any trader would like to use their services to receive produce on their behalf and forward it. So this is what I want to say. Maybe some other point I will make during the question answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. May I now request Professor Ashok Gulati, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for having me on this panel, a very distinguished panel. And whatever Professor Ramesh Chand has said, I endorse that fully. In fact, if I have to add anything, I would say the government has been there, sahi, durust sahi. It should have been done 20 years back, 25 years back, but it's never too late to do it now. I, in writing, have compared these reforms more like the delicensing of industry in 1991. And that has created a bit of commotion in many circles, especially of the left. And the case of Bihar or Kerala and so on and so forth have been put forward that market economy is not the way to go forward. Let me go one by one. When you talk about the future of farming, what is it that you need to ensure? First, you need to ensure that there is enough food security to the country and nutritional security to the country. At the end of the round, it's not the tonnage, it's not just the calories, but also the essential minerals that the body needs. So one of the prime jobs of agriculture is to look after, and MSP was created during the scarcity of 1965 when the country was living from ship to mouth. We didn't have wheat. Entire foreign exchange of the country, if we had used to import wheat, we could have imported maximum 7 million tons of wheat. And we were importing 10 million tons through PL 480. So there was no money in the pocket to buy from the international markets. And on top of that, the import need was so high that you had to rely on PL 480 imports. Now you look at the three commodities in which the MSP or FRP works: wheat, rice, and sugar. Professor Ramesh Chand said, we have more than double of our requirement, the stocks of wheat and rice today with the Food Corporation of India. And we have sugar, which we don't know where to keep it. So the more you eat it, more you subsidize it, more the diabetes and more the sugar problem in the country is likely to be. All these three commodities, in one case, you force the mills to pay, that is the FRP business, and the state advised price of UP, and wheat and rice, for which MSP is somewhat more effective than any other crop. You have massive surpluses. Now, these MSP can go up till the time you are below the international prices, so that when you create surpluses, you can export it. But the moment you cross the international price line, then you will be saddled with all the accumulated stocks, and then you don't know what to do with it. So the time has come. India has entered a phase of somewhat more surpluses, marginal surpluses. Now, if we have to say, oh, we will be short of wheat tomorrow or rice tomorrow, today we are the largest exporter of rice. So rice has another problem, the stubble burning and the depleting water table that is happening in Punjab, Haryana, and so many of health adverse impacts on the entire airshed of the Indo-Gangetic plain, and the deaths just because of PM 2.5 that is happening is likely to be running into millions very soon. So we'll have to look at that. So my first point is that these laws are likely to create a more efficient agriculture by reducing the intermediation cost. The farmer had 100 problems, but the problems on the production front are somewhat less compared to on the marketing front. And this offers an opportunity and alternative freedom to the farmers without demolishing the existing system of APMC or MSPs. So if at all, there will be, this is like if Indian Airlines was the only airline, and if it was not giving you a good service and charging higher price, and you open up 4 more airlines, how can you say the situation is worse off than the previous one? You have a better choice, you go, and there is a competition that will be created. So the problem is competition that will be forced on APMC mandis and the mandi fee, the cess, which is not audited by the CAG. So there is a lot of discretion with that 1,700 crores of money. I think that will be under pressure, and so would be the RTS Commission. But then this intermediation cost will come down. It will make Indian agriculture more competitive. It will increase the market both domestically as well as internationally for that. So that's my first concern. Second, when you look towards 2030, the biggest challenge of Indian agriculture is not just food security, it is nutritional security. I mean, we are one of the worst on the hunger index, which looks into more of stunting issues and underweight issues and all the indicators of malnutrition in the country, iron deficiency or other things. Now, all these things are not as much into staples as they are into high value agriculture, be it the milk, be it meat, eggs, fruits and vegetables. That's where all these minerals are. And that requires, these are more or less perishable commodities. They require a very close contact with the food processors, the retailers, and all that. I think the minimum time, the better logistics, and the world has to learn from how India has done in the case of milk. I don't want to steal the thunder from Mr. Sodhi on this, because they are the champions in this, and they have been operating in a competitive environment with Nestle's or Hudson's of this world. And all are prospering, and milk demand is growing at 4 to 4.5% per annum. Poultry, which is actually growing at 6 to 8% per annum. And that's all driven by the private sector. It doesn't pass through the APMC mandis. There is no commission on that. So I think those are the models that we need to put in place. And these laws actually help clean up the legal framework for the entry of the private sector or cooperatives or farmer producer organizations to link. Now, is the legal change sufficient? I would say no. It is a necessary condition for change, but not perhaps a sufficient condition for change. You know, when the milk revolution took place, and Sodhi will perhaps explain more into this and in depth, that all the structure has to be put in place, from aggregation points to processing to logistics and retailing and all that. And I think we have not done that in fruits and vegetables and many other commodities. And we need to move in that direction. So the FPOs and the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund that NABARD is entrusted with would be seen as complementary factors with these legal changes. And it's not overnight a revolution will come. When delicensing of industry was done, it's not within a year or 2 or 3 that major changes in industry came. In fact, it took 10 years for the Bombay Club to fight that, no, this is right, this is wrong. And finally, Indian industry today is in a much, much better position than what they were in 91. And the case of Bihar, when delicensing of industry was done, how many people went to invest in Bihar? There was hardly any power. The governance issue was a major problem, and roads were missing, infrastructure was missing. Now, these things gradually, when they come up, only then much of the advantage of delicensing of industry was taken by the western and the southern states. That doesn't mean if Bihar did not gain as much as Tamil Nadu gained or Gujarat gained or Maharashtra gained, that delicensing was not useful for the country. You have to think of the country as a whole. Now, if there are states like Punjab or Haryana, if they are opposing tooth and nail, which investors would like to come there? They would better go to UP or they would go to Madhya Pradesh, and they will do the processing there. They will create the jobs there. They will create the GST amount there. So the value addition that will take place, because their agriculture will become much more competitive. I think Punjab and Haryana have to think that the creation of jobs in the value chain, in the food processing industry, because they need a close tie-up, bypassing the mandi system and directly linking up with the farmers' organizations or aggregation groups. I think that is the model that we need to proceed with. I feel it's a very bold step for the government. The market risk is one thing that the smallholders have a lot, and therefore this contract farming and in advance giving them some assurance of the price, what it will be after 3 months or 4 months when the crop comes to the market, I think it minimizes their risk, and that's a good thing. There would be challenges to implementing those types of things, but overall I would say the direction is right. You will have to wait for the results 3 to 5 years. There will be hundreds and thousands of experiments directly buying from the farmers. It will add to the competitiveness of Indian agriculture. So it's a win-win situation. Those who are afraid that MSP will go away, APMC will be wiped out, they are being not misinterpreted, they are, I would say, being misguided. And they need to think coolly, because they will lose the business to other competing states, and they will lose their jobs, and they will lose the GST on that. With that, I want to congratulate the government for undertaking this bold step, and only time will show that in 3 to 5 years or 10 years, there will be much, much better results of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Gulati. Now over to Dr. Samar Singh, Vice-Chancellor, Haryana Agriculture University. May I request Dr. Singh? Dr. Singh, you have to unmute.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As far as agriculture is concerned, the agriculture can have a better future only when the excess workforce employed in the farming moves to the non-farm sector. And there is a greater demand for agricultural products as income increases. As we know that since independence, our food grain production has increased 4 or 5 times, and likewise milk production 6 times, and horticulture crops 9 times, and gross returns have also increased, but the returns of farmers have not increased so much, and that this increase in production that is on the cost of our soil health, water, and environment, because we have not care of this. Resources. That's why there is a need for structural changes in agriculture system to improve the livelihood of the Indian farmers, and connecting the farmers directly to the consumers is increasing farmers' income by 20 to 30%. Agri-tech company that have validated the value proposition of 5 to 7 years. Harnessing the value of these trends lines requires a forward-looking policy environment, which the farm bills are the latest in implementing. And I would like to some highlights on these bills, because many students are also connected with. Actually, the primary motive behind all these farm bills recently was to revamp the agriculture value, necessary to build world-class farm gate to market infrastructure. And taken together, these bills are expected to usher in a revolutionary change in the arena of Indian agriculture, and would go in some way, perhaps a long way, in doubling the income of the farmers. The first bill that farmers is to completely open up the sale of produce outside the agriculture produce, and it not a highway for trading the transaction, but also create e-trading of agriculture produce. Farmers are allowed to sell their produce out agriculture marketing, and that creates possibility for more competition and better pricing. In other words, market is thrown completely open for price come to in the agriculture sector and deal directly with the farmers and make investment in infrastructure. It intends to promote efficient, transparent, and barrier-free interstate and intrastate trade of farmers produce outside the physical premises of the markets or deemed markets notified under by the state APMS legislature and intends to provide a facilitative framework for electronic trading. It creates a new trade era outside the APMS market yards where any buyer having PN number and income tax ID can buy directly from the farmer sellers and free from any imposition of taxes on transaction. This bill will also create a direct supply chain for private organizations with the farmers at cheaper prices. It is the only then that small and marginal farmer can have the hope to exercise the choice of channel to benefit from direct purchases in the trade area or from competition in the market. And this may push for diversification in crops, marketing of fruits and vegetables, where organized trade, particularly e-commerce, is gaining marketing share. Investment in pack house, grading facility, ripening chamber, cold chain, etc. may get a stimulus if the government honors its commitment not to interfere in the trade phase. The second bill, that is Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Service Bill, create a framework for contract farming. It provides a template at the national level of farming agreements with regards to agribusiness, processing, and the entire range of service, including wholesale exporter and large retailers for sale of farming produce at a mutual pre-agreed price. As in our country, more than 80% of farmers are small and marginal, and they cannot buy the big machine, which are very effective and which can reduce our cost of cultivation and improve our quality and production. So in contract farming, the contract can available these good machines to the through these bills. And in addition, contract farming would enable small farmers to reap economic of scale by community farming. The purchasing companies will have a strong incentive to provide the best new technology and farming practice of farmer, ensure quality farm service of seed, feed, fodder, agrochemicals, machinery, timely delivering of extension service. Expansion of contract farming will take time as the quality specification required by the organized businessmen like exporter, processors, and e-commerce players are demanding, and most farmers are not used to these when they sell produce in agricultural produce market. And contract farming may gain better acceptability among the farmers in case of commerce and high value crops, since exports have to meet much higher food standard of improving nation. Third bill is this essential commodities, and it takes away cereals, pulses, oilseed, edible oils, onion, and potato from the list of essential commodities. Therefore, these commodities free of Essential Commodities Act restriction and stand deregulated. This relaxation allows a larger stock without limits for various users of farm product like exporters, processors, and value chain participation in general. The amendment in this places stock limits if horticulture produce prices rise 100% above the previous years and the non 50% above the last year as the average of 5 years. And FUs may also be able to use it for storing their produce for better prices and processing value additions. FU can benefit if they have warehouse and are into processing, storage, packing, transport, distribution, value added, extraordinary circumstances such as in case of war and this famine, natural calamity impose stock limits if there is a steep increase in the price. The stated purpose of the new farm bills enacted by the central government on the agriculture market is to create a one nation, one market system and provide farmers for selling their produce with better price discovery besides attracting private investment in the they enable farmers the freedom to diversify their crops and produce, which reduces the monocrop and income avenue. They can also now sell their produce anywhere to the highest bidder across the country. No longer are they required to go to the mandis or regulatory markets where they are subjected to middlemen and layers of the bureaucracy. Contract farming is now open to farmers with a framework that enables them to boost the value addition of their products via contracts and assured procurement by food processing industry. Retaining the MSP system means the government is underwriting the whole network to ensure farmers receive assured income, or those will also help farmers for better access to and an important announcement has been that there is 1 lakh crore agri infrastructure fund for the part of Bharti to focus on great irrigation points. Agriculture entrepreneurs, agri-tech companies, disease control, enhancing post-harvest management capability like cold storage and warehousing, and food enterprise via cluster-based approach. This recognition of crucial differences in the growth of sub-segment targeted programs towards the various sub-segments like fisheries, animal husbandry, and dairy were also amendments to the Essential Commodities Act. On the support of these sequential amendments to the agriculture farmers, their farming and diversification strategy. These reforms will attract private investment in rural infrastructure as the storage and in transportation. As we know that our youths are not coming in the agriculture, and therefore to give there is strong need to establish the agri-based industry in the rural. And this will enable organized player in the food trade, modern agri-tech companies, food processor, modern retailers, agri-tech startups. Everyone working on the market linkage, post-harvest service, or digital farmers platform will benefit from the new laws, which enable direct interfacing with the farmers and reducing intermediates for better price realization of the crop. Many companies the farmers based relationship. Yes.
Your bandwidth, there is a bandwidth issue at your end, internet bandwidth. So
yeah. And these reforms are the most awaited reforms since independence. They carry big potential to change the Indian agriculture sector by improving the income of the farmer. Large-scale infrastructure regulation mechanism, if implemented in latent state, they can open the door of golden age for the Indian farmers to promote the Indian farming sector as big farming business. Thank you.
May I request, may I request Shri R.S. Sodhi, kindly please, thank you for being with us and your views now, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Dheeraj Sharma ji. Well, after hearing India's top most very renowned agriculture economist, Professor Ramesh Chandra ji and Professor Ashok Gulati, and also in this and earlier session, all the very renowned parliamentarian, economist, academicians, and also foreign expert, and also industries, renowned people. I don't think I can this category. And my views and what I'm going to share is going to be what from the perspective of farmers, because last more than 38 years, I'm the employee of farmer. They are my owners. And before that, I was in my small village in a small farm in Punjab. And I do remember sitting on a trolley of wheat or paddy going to the nearest APMC and how proud we used to feel and what were the feelings. And now what I can share you is the, just a minute, something has happened. Okay. Okay. Sorry, there was some interruption in between. So what I want to tell you is that what farmers thinks. Basically, what farmer is looking when he is producing any produce. What he wants is very stable and remunerative price so that he keeps on investing, keeps on planning. But once they assure that what I'm going to put my labor and my resources on my land or my animals, I'm going to sell my produce at a very, very stable and remunerative. Because in India, farming is not a business like if you want to compare the USA, Europe. In India, farming is a source of livelihood. And already the previous speakers mentioned that more than 80% farmers are marginal landlords. So that is a very, very important, even for policymakers or the political leadership, that this issue is very, very, very sensitive from farmers' point of view. That is why we see a lot of agitation and other thing going on. It is, I don't think it is bad. It is good that people are getting more and aware about farm law. Otherwise, people are not fully aware by this. Like the previous speakers said, the present farm laws were enacted long back and for some purpose. But these laws are now antiquated, outlived the objective. And what has happened because of this continuing, there's a lot of inefficiency and not competence has cropped into the whole value chain or the supply system. Now, let me compare the same thing, because I'm a doodwala with the milk vis-a-vis, because there's a talk of only wheat, paddy about Punjab or Haryana, other farmers. Nobody's talking as far as farmers are concerned all over India. And let me tell you, I have stayed in Punjab in a village, so I know what is the reality there. Okay, you see, dairy or milk, you may not be knowing that India's biggest crop, it is 8 lakh crore per annum. It is more than the combined value of paddy, wheat, and sugar put together. And like mentioned by the previous, the growth rate of dairy or poultry is much, much higher than the crops which we are talking. And reason is simple. In these very high value crop, farmers are free to sell anybody, anywhere, at any price. Buyer is free to buy from anywhere in India, no state restrictions. And also, there are no subsidies. Let me tell you, practically, there are no subsidies in dairy or poultry vis-a-vis the animal husbandry. If you see the state or the central budget of agriculture, whereas animal husbandry is contributing 30% to the agricultural GDP, the budget, central or state budget will not be more than 5 to 6%. Most of the budget goes for subsidies, whether fertilizer or crop loan or giving MSP or the free power, free irrigation, seeds, but you name the subsidy is given the crops, and the sector which is not subsidized is growing much faster. And let me also tell you, there is income tax on non-animals. I mean, dairy or poultry, the income tax, and crop, there is no income tax also. So you just, if you compare, because of this very, very protectionist subsidized design for the last 40, 50, 60 years, inefficiencies have come. Competition is not there. So what are the, let me tell you from farmers' point of view, from the, what are the concern area? I think one area, earlier speakers have mentioned, the disparity. Disparity between urban and rural is increasing day by, it is 1:5. You tell me if these laws are good, reforms are not required, we are doing very good. Day by day, the income of farmer in Punjab vis-a-vis the income in the urban cities, why it is reducing? It means he is not getting the due share of his produce or for his labor or for his resources. And Second is, I think one major area for concern in India, food inflation is considered negative to the economy, because food inflation is basically concerned to the urban consumer. But let me tell you, food inflation is also increase in income to the farmers, producers, to the farmers. When Sensex goes up, industry goes up, we feel happy. When food prices go up, we are unhappy. Why? The one side you want to see prosperity in the village, second side you don't want to give good price. And reason for that also reason is simple, because people feel that India is a lower class people, so we should sell food cheaper. But who is getting the benefit of selling cheap food? Industry, because they have to pay less wages. If food costs increase, industry has to pay more wages, and naturally their profit will be suffering. So in fact, farmers or agriculture economy is subsidizing in the industry by providing cheap labor at a very low cost, because their food cost is low. And second is, people are saying that there will be more, these laws have come, and some industry will get monopolized, big people will dictate. But I think this is also a challenging time for the industry, because governments have put a lot of faith on the industry also. In dairy, farmer get 70 to 80% of what consumer pay in this city. The farmer gets the benefit of value addition. Now it is a challenge to the industry also, that they have to prove that they share the value addition benefit. They share their wealth with the producer. They share what gain from the consumer, what gain in the markets. Otherwise, if industry tries to, instead of RTRs, in case of middlemen, in case of government, Punjab or Haryana taking more margin, if industry start pocketing more margin, I think will be there we are. So it is also in the, and let me tell you, in case of dairy, it has not happened because majority of the supply chain is owned by the farmers-owned organization. You take any state, whether you take Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, Bihar, or Kerala, or any state, or Karnataka, farmers-owned organization dictate the prices. If farmers-owned organization is paying 25 rupees, even private fellows to pay. So with this farmers coming, industry and policymakers and the political regime has to do a lot of monitoring also, that nobody is taking undue benefit of this benefit. Now, what is required? I think earlier also, I think there is misconception. Lot of communication needs to be given to all the stakeholders and clarify the doubts. And I think that is happening. And also, second, I will request to the policymaker, don't restrict food inflation. I mean, recently we saw onion prices going, let us import onion. And when onion price will go to 1 rupee, nobody will come to the rescue of the farmers. Let the demand and supply decide. Today prices go, tomorrow more farmers grow, price will go up. It just takes 2 to 3 months to. Third thing, I think all the other mentioned, I mean, why to go for only wheat and paddy? You know, we import 75,000 crore rupees of edible oil in India. Until mid-90s, we were self-sufficient. We continue to produce wheat, paddy, and now we are surplus. Why Punjab farmers, getting diversifying into crops where they can earn more, horticulture, fruits? Because it is a very, very protected field. Ki wheat, paddy, paid karo, MSP jaakar mil jayega. Let you get few power and nothing is free. What 6.5 or 8% state government charging commission from the buyer, it is going into that subsidy only. And let me tell you, no buyer is giving subsidy. They are paying, it is added to the cost of buying. Transportation, any fee is added. So that much farmers will get less price, whatever fee you are paying. So second is, people say what RTI will do. In India, only little more than 7,000 APMC are there. And you know how many mandis are there in milk, which is the most perishable item? Just 4 hours a life, more than 3.5 lakh. Each village is a mandi. Everybody is competing for the farmers produce. So why not ask these Artiyas, go to 2-3 villages, start their collection center from the farmers, put up their scale there, put up their packing, get connected with the various buyers of all India and sell their farmers produce to anywhere in India. Now e-commerce there, IIM is there, everybody there. And naturally efficiency has to come in. They have to reasonably charge, because otherwise somebody else, you'll find in most of the Indian villages, there are 2-3 buyers of the milk, private, cooperative, unorganized, everybody is competing with the same produce. So why not competition should be there? And also you can know a lot of MSP also, because people are looking for the, lot of MSP in the whole supply chain. Like mentioned, now new structures have to come. In this new structure, MSP, Artiyas can find their role. They have got the knowledge, they have got the skill, they have got the courage. So why not they find their new role? So I like, in the end, I like to say that this is a new system. Any change, any reform is risky in the beginning, because we only know the negative point, we don't know the positive point. Let us give it a chance. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. There will be some changes further. Everybody will understand, but don't resist anything which is giving freedom to the farmer, freedom to the buyer to buy, sell anywhere in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we'll take some questions. The first question is, I think either Professor Ramesh Chandra or Professor Gulati can take the question. The question is germane to, there's a discussion on the MSP. How is it that MSC got into this entire picture? I mean, do you think MSP is the reason why farmers are in certain areas concerned? And second, is MSP actually the way forward for us? I mean, why should, when there is subsidizing of the inputs, why should there be a price guarantee? There is also, huge discussion which took place in UK about MRPs, the maximum retail price, where they had to, none of the countries, India is actually amongst those rarest of rare countries which on FMCG products still has MRP. So over to you, sir.
So I think there are two parts of question. You can distribute it between Gulati and me. One is MSP the way forward? And second is whether there is any kind of hidden move or something like that to temper with MSP. So you can pose either of these questions to either of us.
The MSP as a way forward for you.
Okay. In one of my writing, I produced one interesting table, and that table is degree of government intervention in the segment of agriculture and growth rate of that segment. You start with fishery, there is no government intervention, there is no MSP, there is no subsidy, there are not even cooperatives supported by government in fishery. You know the growth rate is close to double digits. That is the growth rate in fishery. Then you come to this segment of Sodhi Saab, livestock segment, or dairy, poultry separately you take. There is no MSP. There is no support for the output. There is no free kind of input or subsidized input. And gross value added is increasing by 5 or something percent, but output is increasing by 7%. Then you go to the third segment, which is horticulture, fruit and vegetable. Again, there is no MSP. The growth rate is 3.5%. When you come to rice and wheat and cereals, where there is all kind of support and MSP, the growth rate is only 1.14%. So you see, the growth rate is mainly demand driven. You can't sustain growth by giving price support artificially. If something is not supported by demand side factor, then it is very difficult to keep its profitably artificially intact. So this is the point which was made by Dr. Gulati also, that we should look at what is happening to our consumption pattern, how diets are getting diversified in India, what kind of food preferences are developing outside India. So if we let our cropping pattern become demand driven, that will bring much, much higher profitability and income to the farmer than the profitability they are getting from MSP. The message from this is, yes, MSP in some cases, like Punjab and Haryana, right now they are in such a stage that more than 80-90% area is under rice and wheat. And rice and wheat are such dominant crop that if these two crops are not there, their economy will collapse. So I will say that unless we are able to develop some alternative for these two states in place of rice and wheat, it is that we have to give them a reasonable level of MSP, which in fact in the case of wheat is 2 times of C2 cost, not A2 plus FL for wheat crop. So we need to work out alternative for these two states. Unless that alternative come, we can continue with MSP. But we need to work strongly on the alternative in physical term, alternative in technological terms, and also alternative in terms of policy intervention.
Wonderful.
So what I would like to say on way
Professor
forward.
Gulati?
Well, I think a very interesting thing that you put on the table is you mentioned about the subsidies. Compared to wheat and rice or maybe sugarcane, these are the most highly subsidized crops in terms of either free power or highly subsidized fertilizers, even interest rate subvention on crop loans. All these things, when you add, in case of rice in Punjab, it turns out to be more than 15% of the value of agriculture. Now, it is this subsidy. And then on top of this, this is the farmer part, which has distorted the cropping patterns. Then you have open-ended procurement. So there is zero market risk, literally. And therefore, he produces more and more. And he would like you buy it from me, dump it in the sea or do whatever you like. But my risk is zero. Now, this is not how all India policies can be made. You have to look at the demand and supply equation. This MSP business, as I said earlier, is the 1965 phenomenon. It has outlived its age. And now, if you have to give subsidies instead of giving, what are you doing? You are depleting your water table. You are creating pollution from 24th of October to 19th of November. If you look at the Delhi pollution, the stubble burning contributed between 1% to 42% of the total pollution of PM 2.5. So it's literally choking people to death, slow death. So you are giving subsidies for poison. This is stubble burning part, but the ammonia that is being released through highly subsidized urea in granular form, the nitrogen use efficiency is about 30%. The rest goes into the atmosphere or goes into the water, contaminating your water with high nitrate content and in the environment. So literally, we have such distorted policies of subsidies that actually, कहते हैं ना अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी मार रहे हैं. Farmers' income in Punjab and Haryana is not going to grow at a faster pace with wheat and rice. They need to shift where the demand is growing, as Professor Ramesh Chand was saying, 3 times faster because with rising incomes, the fruits and vegetables. So all these subsidies on fertilizer, on free power, on canal waters, I think need to be shifted in terms of investment subsidies. I would like to see Punjab, Haryana being, main fields of orchards. Incomes can go up 3 times of the farmers. It will be much more sustainable and have drip. So you save your water table, you give better environment, you have higher income, let the center and the state come together and announce a 10,000 crore package of diversification in this region towards high value crops. They are the most fortunate ones where 98%, 99% irrigation, there's no other state of India like that. So they should be getting 3 times more income per hectare. They are stuck into this wheat and rice, which was the need of 1960s and 70s, and therefore, center devised policies which were good for that time, but no more today. I think this paradigm shift has to be made, but there is a political aspect. Half a minute I would take. Earlier, this 8.5% today, 6% for the state and 2.5% for the Arthya, before GST reform was 14.5%. 14.5% on wheat and rice. This was basically fleecing the center for 5,000 crores of rupees and then giving free power to the farmers, which was costing them about 5,000 crores. And I talked to the minister concerned at that time in Punjab. He said, Ashok, our game is very simple. We get all this money from the center through these taxes and cess and whatnot, and then we get all the votes from the farmers by giving free power. But it is killing the future generations of Punjab, because in central Punjab, the water table is going down by almost 2 feet every year. So what are we doing? I think we need to correct our policies in the interest of the farmer to raise his income. Punjab farmers, what they showed to the country in 60s for wheat and rice, they need to show high value agriculture, precision agriculture and exotic things, exporting to Gulf countries and other places, and center and state should come together to form a package over a 5-year period, and only then I think Punjab farmers will gain, the country will gain. Thank you.
Dr. Samar Singh, started his talk by talking about the people employed in the agriculture sector. So his statement was that there is a large percentage of population which is employed in the agriculture sector, and agricultural development could take place if that population gets employed elsewhere. Now, in view of the global scenario where employment opportunities, are becoming a challenge across the world, how do you think the current development or the current developments in the form of these three acts, now they're acts of parliament, will result in employment creation? Dr. Samar Singh, to you. You're muted, sir. You're muted.
Because there is a provision these bills that many private players will come in the market to develop infrastructure. For example, in horticulture, processing plant, cold storage, and others, and also establish this rural industries in rural area, and there is a big scope of employment in those industries.
Dr. Sodhi, yeah. Sorry, please.
That will certainly help our youths, and because many startups have been will take advantage of these bills, and many entrepreneurs they are very interested to come in the agriculture sector, and definitely they provide the employment for our youth.
Sodhi Sahab, there is a, do you think there'll be a time when we'll have a brand like AMUL in the agriculture sector as well, which will probably solve some of the adulteration problems?
No, actually, brand basically is I want because of that purpose to assure the consumer that what product you are buying is pure and whatever ingredients are mentioned on the pack, it is the same. And during pandemic, I think the biggest shift we have noticed in food is consumer has shifted a lot from loose or unbranded food to packed, branded, and branded also trustworthy brands and affordable. So naturally, the future is for the branded food only. With the more people upgrading themselves from the cereals or carbohydrates to the protein and the fat-rich diet, where naturally you have to spend little more and farmer is also going to get little more. Branded food is going to gain more and market share. And in case of milk, if milk is growing, dairy industry growing at 5%, the branded segment is going at 12 to 13%. So more than double.
Just imagine, I think there is a very important question which we discussed. This fact that the water table has been going down has been known to particularly people in Punjab for last at least 15 years. You know, the water table is going down. Contamination of water. People talk about health issues in certain parts of Punjab particularly. These are all issues which were known. We talked about this in the previous panel also. When you export rice, you export water. You know, substantial amount of water. How is it that, what do you think were the reasons why, despite knowing all of this in the last maybe 15 to 20 years, there was no substantive effort made to reduce the acreage under paddy particularly? We just got the decrease has been from about 2.8 million hectares to about 2.2 to 2. It's not been large. Why do you think this has happened? Ramesh sir.
Oh, thank you. Incidentally, I belong to Punjab and I grow paddy.
So do I, and I am also from a farming family.
Yeah. You see, the example which you have given, in economic theory, there is sufficient explanation, tragedy of commons. If you are not sure that the water where you are living will be at same level tomorrow, some other will not withdraw the water, you tend to overdraw it. Similarly, forest, this groundwater, aquifer, they come in the category of tragedy of commons. Because they come in the tragedy of commons, so it is responsibility of the ruling institution, whether it is a state, whether it is center, whether it is a local community, whosoever control that as per the legal framework of a country, it is their responsibility to rise above the short-term interest and to safeguard it. So this we know that unless the government rise above that, it will not happen. So on that ground, I find that Haryana government, they have recently taken some step, which is a very good beginning, that in some areas they put some restrictions, they provide some incentives. If you shift rice with some other crops, it will be purchased at MSP. And they did a couple of other things also this Kharif seasons. So this groundwater going down will not be checked unless government do something proactively, or through technology we are able to develop some superior alternative. It will not happen. It will continue, and unless it reach a stage where it is completely depleted, that it is not possible to deplete it beyond that, it will stop at that point if concerned government do not undertake any action on it.
There was a new ministry which was created. The ministry was the Ministry for Fisheries and Animal Husbandry and Dairy. This ministry, you know, could there be some linkages between these recent farm bills, the passing of farm and leveraging on this ministry, which could probably result in the overall improvement of the agriculture scene in our country? So as Mr. Sodhi was mentioning that there are 3.5 lakh collection centers. I have witnessed some of those. Mr. Sodhi gave us the privilege of witnessing some of those facilities there when I was in Ahmedabad. So it's beautiful to see those sites where the milk collection takes place. Can there be, you know, some synergies between the agriculture procurement of the crops and the procurement of the milk, and so that synergies could result in greater benefit for the farm sector? Could that be the way forward for the future of farming? Sodhi sir.
Sir, you asked me, I'm sorry. Well, definitely. You see, one has to see that in this collection centers are owned by the producer or the suppliers who give milk. So tomorrow, if they want to form a cooperative society of potato or any fruits or the vegetable or the for paddy, they are free. In fact, in some parts of Gujarat already it has started some cooperative societies of potato and the honey and the edible has been formed and it's working well. There is, I mean, you don't need to duplicate the infrastructure. Only thing is you have to say the shareholders have to be, because in case of milk, shareholder will be only who is supplying milk to the society, who is having 2 or 3 animals, not necessarily the landowner. So it is a possibility.
So a question for Mr. Ramesh sir, आपके लिए question है. The question is that what could be the safeguards for preventing the hoarding from big players, you know, under extraordinary circumstances, given that the market will come into play?
No, I saw the question. I think that student has also not understood the Essential Commodity Act. Essential Commodity Act has not been removed. It has been modified. The modification is that earlier we used to put restriction based on whims of the bureaucrat, that he suddenly feel prices have increased, so stock limit laga do. Now there is a criteria laid down for it. And that criteria is that if in case of say cereal, pulses and oil seeds, there is increase in price of the order of 50% over a year or over average of 5 years, then government can consider to impose Essential Commodity Act. And this has already been done on 23rd October after these acts were implemented in case of onion. So it is not that government has completely left the field free to stockist and jamakhor or unke liye. The only thing is that the criteria for imposing Essential Commodity Act has been defined. A trigger has been defined there, that if the price increase is less than 50%, no rationale, government cannot apply Essential Commodity Act. But price increase, if it crosses 50%, government has all the power and it had earlier to impose the Essential Commodity Act. So that is the real situation.
I think a few years ago, one of the greatest initiatives of Prime Minister Modi at that point in time was requesting people to give up subsidy on the LPG. You know, I think crores of people voluntarily gave subsidy on LPG. And gradually now we are easing and moving towards a non-subsidized LPG sort of a situation. Over the years, we'll be able to do it. Do you think, Professor Gulati, the way forward for future of farming in India could be that the farmers could be encouraged to voluntarily give up some of these subsidies?
I don't think. You know, there are two things. The way subsidies or protection is measured internationally. You know, there are about 45, 50 countries for which there is something called producer support estimates that are measured over the long period of 20 years. And that's a standard international methodological framework from US to Japan to India to China and others. One thing we should understand, Indian farmer actually is not net subsidized even after including the input subsidies, because his output pricing had been very much controlled, and they were controlled through export control, stocking limits, movement restrictions, and so on and so forth, all sorts of controls that you can't sell it to this, you can't take it there, you can't do. Now that is what is being liberalized so that output prices can go up. And I very much agree with Dr. Sodhi on this. You know, unless you let the prices come to its natural level, at least, if you're not artificially jacking up, but at least to its natural level, the wages cannot increase and therefore the prosperity in the rural areas cannot come. So my first point is that instead of giving all these subsidies, half of which disappear on the way, like the food subsidy, you know, the food subsidy, you want to sell a commodity that costs FCI 37 rupees for rice, you want to sell at 3 rupees, 30% of the subsidy will disappear on the way. I think what we need to do, both in consumer side as well as on the producer side, is give subsidy in terms of cash directly to the farmers' accounts so that it is crop neutral. Free power you want to give. You, instead of subsidizing the price of power, that should be determined by what the cost of power is. But on per hectare basis, you give it to the farmer, okay, we give you, China gives aggregate input subsidy of about $21 billion to its farmers on per hectare basis. And that becomes crop neutral. Then the farmer knows that if I save water or I save power, that money comes to me. So there is a saving. But if you are subsidizing just power as the price of power, then he has nothing to save. So he burns power like anything, and all the leakages in the system are ascribed to subsidy to agriculture. So I think we have to make a gradual move from price subsidies to income transfers, both at the farmer level on per hectare basis, as well as income transfer for poor targeted consumers. 67% of India getting wheat and rice at 2 rupees, 3 rupees a kg. It's a joke. 67% of India cannot afford
Understood.
food.
I will now just conclude the session, and I'll request we'll go in the backward order. Just 30 seconds on how do you think these three acts of parliament will lead the way for the future of farming in India in next 5 years? Where do you see the farming sector going? So we'll start with Shri R.S. Sodhi.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dheeraj Sharma ji. I think, like I mentioned, these three reforms will bring lot of competition and supply chain efficiency. There will be a lot of restructuring happening in the agri supply chain, and it is going to provide lot of employment in the rural sectors. Government will be gradually coming out, MSP and private entrepreneurs will be entering, and it is going to be a very good employment sector. And I think with this, we may be now going to produce more of the agriculture produce which we really want, demand for which is increased, like edible oil or pulses or other protein food, instead of these more of cereals or carbohydrates. So I think let us give time. Let us wait for 2, 3, 4 hours before committing. And we see already the Principal Secretary mentioned that already we have procured more than the budget of this paddy. So I think, and it has been purchased at MSP, so why to worry?
Understood. Dr. Samar Singh?
Yeah, through this bill, there will be a more investment in infrastructure, and for that farmers can use new technology which they cannot afford. For example, sense technology, other artificial and that technology which are very costly at this stage. And by adoption of those technologies, no doubt certainly there will be a better quality product. And with the adoption of those technology, better quality will be there and more yield will be there. Ultimately, our GDP growth will be increased.
Thank you. Professor Gulati?
Well, I would say that this will be heralding an era of a paradigm shift in agriculture marketing. It will make our value chains much more competitive, much more demand driven, and with the signals coming from the consumer to the farmer, what to produce, how safe to produce, what colors are organic or inorganic. So the demand signals will start coming, and this will help increase the farmer's income, and also because of the lower intermediation cost will help the consumer end also. And that's a win-win situation for all. In 3 to 5 years, there'll be hundreds and thousands of pilots in this. Some will fail, but I think the direction in which the country will move will be good for farmers as well as consumers and for the competitiveness of Indian agriculture. That's the key thing for me.
Wonderful. Professor Ramesh, sir.
Yeah, I feel that if state support and implement these changes in true spirit, they are definitely going to transform the way we produce food, the way we market food, and uh, the way the farmer are participating in the entire process. What is needed today is modern knowledge, modern capital into agriculture, and I think these bills are paving the way for that. Thank you.
Sir, I'll just conclude by just summarizing our discussion, but I'll just speak for maybe 60 seconds. You know, as a professor of marketing, you know, consumer behavior is something that usually determines that precedes the generation of demand. And we were talking about demand and supply. You know, changes in consumer behavior itself can result in significant changes in the way the society functions. I mean, I remember back 21, 22 years ago when I first went to US to study, you know, the fast foods were growing. You know, McDonald's of the world were growing. And the way people were eating food substantially changed at that point in time. They had some 35,000 outlets. Then came KFC, Burger King, so on and so forth. Gradually, over a period of time, I think the food eating patterns itself are shifting. I have seen in my lifetime, particularly in the North American and European context, and now it will flow down to the Indian context also, that the food moved from, you know, 3 square meals to maybe eating Atkins diet to, you know, protein diet to low-fat diet and so on and so forth. And this became common parlance. I mean, it was just not restricted to a handful of individuals. It perpetuated the society, resulted in creation of chains of food stores. In Indian context too, I still remember that from a marketing standpoint, there used to be advertisement of Sapola and advertisement of Dhara about 30 years ago, where they would talk about Swadisht Vyanjan. And now we have moved from Swadisht Vyanjan to Paushtik Ahar. I think we have had that circle. And if we keep that circle in place, I think the idea for today, I think, was that focus on from food security, the shift to nutritional security. I mean, if we shift from food security to nutritional security, the nutritional security itself could usher the same era that was ushered in 1960s. With the new crops, new types of diet, you know, staple, non-staple, it doesn't matter. We have adapted ourselves. I mean, just imagine the cornflakes market. It has come, we have adapted. So I think the concept of the 3 square meals itself is going to change. I think people probably will go back to 2 meals a day, which was probably what was happening before also. And if those changes take place, the consumer behavior itself will drive to a certain extent, it already is, by reducing demand for wheat and rice, resulting in a lot of disease. So I think if we were to summarize, the current state of agriculture primarily is because of the administrative inefficiencies which have happened over a period of time. And one of the bridge between the current state and the future state, the vehicles from moving from current state to the next one, could be improvements in the procurement vis-a-vis the current act, maybe information and technology, more IT driven mandis and so on and so forth. Subsidies, I think cooperative farming, we have mentioned that in our discussion. I think if cooperatives can have milk collection and produce a huge brand like AMUL, it's evident that the states could come up with cooperatives for cooperative farming and cooperatives for procurement of these crops. And finally, I think employment, as far as employment is concerned, I think there is substantial opportunities which will be created probably if this is taken in the full spirit, even by the corporate sector, aside from what Professor Ramesh had mentioned, the states. And I think if the corporate sector also takes it in the right spirit and takes a more holistic approach, and I would say more benign approach of spreading the profits over a period of time rather than getting those profits right away in the beginning of this era, it will result in positive outcomes. But I think the acts are there. The vehicles for transition from the current state to the next state probably would come out in the rules and regulations. Overall, I think what we could gather, even from the representatives from the Punjab state, that it is all in good spirit. And I think we have done our bit in reducing the communication/miscommunication or whatever information or overload of information is available. I'm sure, sir, this will go. Our students will write. We will encourage them to write small white papers, and we'll compile them and send them to various places who can take advantage of our discussions that have happened today. I am so grateful to all of you for sparing your time, and I look forward to hosting you at another time in person in our institution. So, point of view, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I thank all the panelists for joining us today and for an insightful discussion. Have a very good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.